Chapter 591. Old Friend 1. Jisoo's expression didn't change. He said in a low voice, "The Chin clan doesn't keep gigolos. She deserves good treatment." You. Princess Royal of Anyang was so angry that her face turned purple. She stopped and stared at the man's tall figure, who was still strolling leisurely. "How dare you? I'm a princess." Jisoo stopped and looked back. His eyes were full of undisguised mockery. "Oh. I didn't see what else Princess Royal can do other than reincarnate. How dare you? Princess Royal, please calm down. Today is the Empress Dowager's birthday." Jisoo continued to walk forward quickly, leaving Lee Heelan alone. She was so angry that her chest heaved up and down. After arguing with Jisoo, when she came back to her senses, Pang Xiao and Qin Yining had already approached Ci and palace. Lee Heelan scolded the palace servant beside her with a sullen face. "Why aren't you following them? What are you doing here?" The palace servant's face turned red from the scolding. She lowered her head and cautiously followed behind Lee Heelan. Qin Yining naturally didn't know what was happening behind her. At this time, she and Pang Xiao were allowed to enter the main hall of Ci and palace. Today was the Empress Dowager's birthday. She was wearing a red and gold robe and a golden phoenix crown with tassels on her head. She was dressed gracefully and elegantly. The middle-aged woman sitting beside the Empress Dowager was also wearing a light gold robe. Her hair was tied up in a bun with a phoenix crown. Although her appearance couldn't be called beautiful, it was still very pleasing to the eye. This was the Empress. When the Empress Dowager, and the relatives attending the banquet heard that the Prince Zhongshuan had arrived, even their voices became weaker. They all looked outside the door. They saw Pang Xiao, who was wearing a purple robe and a purple crown, bending down slightly. He carefully helped a pregnant woman, who was wearing a light blue brocade jacket with arrow sleeves and a dark blue long skirt. She had a big belly but didn't lose her charm. The Empress Dowager smiled. The Empress saw that Pang Xiao, that fiend, didn't care about lowering himself to support his wife. Then she looked at Qin Yining, who was walking carefully with her hands on her waist and belly, but still looked very eye-catching and beautiful. Her heart ached. Some women were born with good fortune. They were born beautiful and their husbands doted on them wholeheartedly. What about her? Although she was the empress, the imperial concubines in the emperor's harem were all beautiful. She was already old, but she was pregnant first. It was inevitable that she would become the target of public criticism in the palace. To put it bluntly, she wished she could keep her eyes open even when she was sleeping. The thick layer of powder on the Empress' face couldn't hide her tiredness. She then looked at Qin Yining. His complexion was good, and his skin was so delicate that it looked like it could be broken by the wind. His situation was completely different from hers. Based on how much Prince Zhongshuan doted on her, her life must be very pleasant. While the Empress' heart was spinning, Qin Yining and Pang Xiao had already arrived. Pang Xiao first supported Qin Yining and slowly knelt down on the brocade mattress that a palace maid had brought over. He himself knelt to the side. The two respectfully bowed to the Empress Dowager. "Congratulations to the Empress Dowager for a long life and 1,000 blessings." Good, good. This child, you are still so courteous in front of Ijia. Your wife's body is heavy, why aren't you helping her up? The Empress Dowager smiled and reached out a hand to Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao had lowered his head to support Qin Yining as he obeyed the order and didn't see the Empress Dowager's actions. The Empress Dowager's hand was raised stiffly for a moment. Seeing that no one was paying attention to her, she could only awkwardly withdraw her hand. The smile on her face was still loving. Pang Xiao helped Qin Yining sit down on the rose chair that the chamberlain had brought over. Because of Pang Zhao's status, the family members of the imperial relatives had to take a step back. In addition, Pang Zhao was an influential figure in the imperial court. The news that Li Qitian had ordered people to impeach Pang Zhao and failed had already spread throughout the capital. Now that the imperial relatives saw Pang Zhao again, they were naturally more respectful. Qin Yining naturally noticed that the atmosphere in the hall had become quiet after their arrival. He sighed inwardly, but maintained a dignified expression on his face. The Empress smiled and chatted with Qin Yining, looking at your month. You will be a mother in 4 months, right? Qin Yining hurriedly stood up to reply, but was gently stopped by the Empress. We are family, there is no need to be so polite. Today is Imperial Mother's family banquet. We are just relatives gathered together to chat. Yes, thank you, Empress. Qin Yining still bowed his head in a humble and respectful manner. At this time, they heard the chamberlain in front of the door say, Anyang eldest princess and prince consort have arrived. Everyone looked back again and saw Li Helan in a gorgeous dress. His exquisitely made-up face still had an angry expression that hadn't faded. He quickly walked in. Ji Ziyu followed behind in a white robe with arrow sleeves. These two people, one was a flower of wealth in the mortal world, the other was a cold moon in the night sky. They didn't seem to be the same kind of people. The two arrived in front of the Empress Dowager and the Empress and bowed. Li Helan didn't wait for the Empress Dowager's order and had already stood up. He acted spoiled and leaned over to sit next to the Empress Dowager, separating the Empress Dowager and the Empress Dowager. Imperial Mother, did you miss sun? The Empress Dowager helplessly tapped Li Helan's forehead and lightly reprimanded, You wild monkey, when will you learn to be as steady as your relatives and sisters? Li Helan proudly raised his chin and looked around. Immediately, some of the Li family's relatives, who believed that one person had achieved the Tao, all began to praise Li Helan. Some said that the princess was pure and sincere, while others said that the princess had a pure and innocent heart. In the end, it was a one-sided praise that made the Empress Dowager unable to close her mouth. The Empress sat on the side with her eyes down and didn't say anything. She, as the sister-in-law, knew her younger sister-in-law's personality very well. The main culprit for raising Li Helan to this kind of personality was the Empress Dowager and Li Qitian's unreasonable love. Li Helan was very happy to be praised. However, when he saw Pang Zhao and Qin Yining sitting side by side in the first row and Qin Yining with such a big belly, the smile on Li Helan's face stiffened. So Prince Zhongshuan and Wang Fei have also arrived. This one actually didn't see you, it's really disrespectful. Pang Zhao stood up and cupped his hands, saying, Eldest princess is too serious. This subject and this subject's wife have also just arrived. Li Helan raised his eyebrows and looked at Qin Yining, who was still sitting in his original position. I see that Prince Zhongshuan's Wang Fei went to a barbarian land. Not only is her belly bigger than a normal woman 6 months pregnant, but she has also forgotten all the rules and etiquette. It can be seen that the environment makes a person. These words are quite reasonable. Li Helan's harsh words made everyone frown. Right now, everyone present knew that Qin Yining was pregnant with twins. It was normal for her belly to be bigger. Moreover, regardless of whether her chastity was still there, Prince Zhongshuan didn't care. How could an outsider say anything? Today was the Empress Dowager's birthday. As the eldest princess, she was the first to come out and cause trouble. She was really too unruly. Everyone shook their heads in their hearts. Qin Yining, on the other hand, pretended that she had heard a dog barking. Pang Zhao clenched his fist and looked coldly and disdainfully at Li Helan. He smiled and said, Eldest princess is still the same as before, ignorant and naive. The Empress Dowager has a good upbringing. This subject admires you. Li Helan's face immediately darkened. The Empress Dowager also frowned. The clan relatives were so frightened that they sucked in a breath of cold air. Looking at all the civil and military officials in the court, from top to bottom, including your majesty, who would dare to say that the Empress Dowager didn't teach her daughter well. But Pang Shao was someone who dared to go against 33 imperial edicts. Your majesty couldn't do anything to him. Of all the people present, there really wasn't anyone who dared to do anything to him. Moreover, Li Helan was the one who was in the wrong first. The Empress saw that the Empress Dowager's face was green with anger and hurriedly changed the topic with a smile. It's almost time. The stage had also been set up. Imperial Mother, how about we go to Fongting Court? The Empress Dowager finally didn't feel so embarrassed. She nodded and ordered everyone to go watch the play. Then she said, "It's cooler there. Let's set the banquet in Fongting Court." "Yes, Imperial Mother, just enjoy yourself today. Leave everything to your daughter-in-law." The Empress smiled gently and walked in front while holding the Empress Dowager's arm. Everyone followed behind her. Li Helan watched as Pang Shao protected Qin Yining as they walked to Fongting Court. She was so angry that she wanted to rush up and beat Qin Yining to the ground. Who wasn't married? Was she just going to show off that she was married to Pang Shao? Li Helan was so angry that she had a sullen face the entire time she was watching the play. Even when the Empress Dowager talked to her, she was unwilling to pay attention to her. The other clan relatives didn't know how to joke around, and the atmosphere in Fongting Court was particularly gloomy. This gloomy atmosphere continued until Li Qitian arrived. Along with Li Qitian, there were a few officials and nobles that he trusted. Lu Heng was among them. When Lu Heng came in, the first person he saw was Qin Yining. She had her head down and was receiving the fruit that Pang Shao handed to her. Her smile was gentle, especially when she gently stroked her round belly. That motherly gentleness made Lu Heng feel a bit dazed. He even fantasized that it would be great if it was his own child. Lu Heng quickly forced himself to look away. He followed behind Li Qitian and bowed to the Empress Dowager and Empress with the other officials. After the two sides bowed to each other, they rearranged their seats. Li Qitian began by reciting a birthday speech in a clear voice, thanking the Empress Dowager for raising and teaching him. The scene was very touching. Some of the women with shallow eye sockets even had tears in their eyes. After the birthday speech, it was time for the birthday banquet. Li Qitian gave the order, and the people in the imperial kitchen began to move. They brought out delicacies, fresh fruits, and exquisite snacks. The palace servants were well trained. Even though there were so many people, no one heard a cough or the sound of utensils being put down. When the banquet was ready, Li Qitian raised his wine cup, stood up, and said, "This is the first cup. Jin proposes that everyone drink together. May the Empress Dowager enjoy good health forever." Everyone stood up and raised their wine cups to toast. They said in unison, "May the Empress Dowager enjoy good health forever." The Empress Dowager was very happy. She took a sip of wine in a dignified manner and ordered everyone to sit down and make themselves at home. The officials and the women in the imperial household began to drink and chat. The noblewomen went to toast the Empress Dowager in groups of 3 or 5. There were also officials who went to toast Your Majesty. The atmosphere gradually warmed up, and everyone seemed to be very happy. Chapter 592. When Li Qitian heard that a monk claimed to be an old friend and asked to see him, his heart was filled with suspicion. In the whole world, Tian Jizi was the only monk who dared to claim to be an old friend and asked to see him without fear of his Son of Heaven's prestige. Li Qitian couldn't hide his anxiety. "What token are you talking about? Show it to me." "Yes." Seeing that Li Qitian was anxious, the imperial bodyguard hurriedly presented a brocade box. When he opened it, there was a jade pendant in the brocade box. The familiar bamboo pattern and luster made Li Qitian suddenly stand up and shout angrily, "Quick! Catch that old thing for me!" The imperial bodyguard was so frightened by Li Qitian that he trembled all over. He hurriedly saluted and rushed out in a hurry. This jade pendant was given to Tian Jizi after Tian Jizi helped him, Pang Xiao, and Ji Ziyu predict the fortunes of Tian Jizi. The prediction at that time had been kept in Li Qitian's heart for many years. He was not the Ziwei Emperor's star, and this matter had always been troubling him. In fact, he had wanted to kill Tian Jizi back then. Although he gave the jade pendant to Tian Jizi in person, he immediately ordered people to hunt down Tian Jizi. However, Tian Jizi was like a slippery loach that couldn't be caught. At first, there was still some news about Tian Jizi, so he immediately ordered people to chase after him. However, they always came up empty-handed. Later, when he ascended the throne, Tian Jizi disappeared without a trace. Who knew that when she reappeared, she had already sought refuge with the Titan? Li Qitian was determined to kill Tian Jizi. Ever since he ordered people to quickly chase after him, Li Qitian's eyes were cold and his face was extremely unhappy. Everyone present clearly saw Li Qitian's strange behavior. Even the Empress Dowager didn't dare to say anything. She slowly put down her ivory chopsticks. Li Qitian saw that everyone was looking at him, so he said, "Tian Jizi appeared outside the palace gates. I have already ordered people to quickly arrest her. Previously, I heard from a reliable source that Tian Jizi has already sought refuge with the Uchin Khan and is wholeheartedly loyal to the Titan. This time, she actually dared to appear in front of the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet. She clearly has some ulterior motive. Your Majesty is right. Duh. Titan B. There's no need for him to expose himself in order to gather information. This humble subject feels that she must be up to something big." Under Li Qitian's gaze, the officials were all extremely indignant and carried out the most malicious speculations about the arrival of Tian Jizi. Li Qitian listened to everyone's discussion, but he was very confident in his heart. Li Guanwen heard this and immediately received the order. He read it in a hoarse and high-pitched voice that was unique to the chamberlains. Yanlong Vane, at the bottom of Zhong Mountain, on the 9th day of the 9th month, golden light appears. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but look at each other. Even the gloomy Empress Dowager's attention was attracted by the words on the letter. "Dear officials, what do you think?" An imperial relative said, "Your Majesty, this servant thinks this is impossible." "Where is Zhong Mountain?" "That place is not far from the capital. It is where the imperial tombs of Beiji are located. The Dayan dynasty is located in the south. How could the dragon vein of their country appear in the imperial tombs of Beiji?" Someone else said, "Perhaps the dragon vein refers to the treasure of the Yan dynasty." "That's even more ridiculous." "Yes, it's impossible." Everyone present knew that Li Qitian had ordered people to surround the area that was hit hard by the earthquake. Even now, they were still searching inch by inch for the whereabouts of the treasure. Moreover, they were certain that the treasure must be hidden there. Under Li Qitian's close surveillance, the treasure couldn't have been quietly transported to the capital. How could the treasure, which should be near the old capital of the Dayan dynasty, appear in the imperial tombs of Beiji? But wasn't there a rumor that the treasure appeared in the capital a while ago? Someone else asked. The officials began to discuss this matter. Most people didn't believe that the treasure was hidden in the imperial tombs of Beiji. However, there were also some people who thought that the rumor was baseless. The rumor that the treasure was in the capital must be traceable. Perhaps it was really hidden in Zhong Mountain. Chapter 593. Pang Xiao had expected this to happen. Li Qitian would definitely call him over to test him. Pang Xiao stood up and cupped his hands. Replying to your majesty, this official thinks that this might be a trap. Oh. What do you mean? Li Qitian's expression was calm. He looked at Pang Zhao's expression without a trace, as if he wanted to see any expression on his face. Pang Zhao thought that this matter did not involve his own interests and safety, so there was no harm in speaking frankly. He said, Tian Jizi is crafty and scheming. She is also loyal to the outside race. She is full of hostility towards De Zhou. How could she tell us where the Yan dynasty's treasure is hidden? If she really knew the whereabouts of the treasure, she would think of a way to secretly transport it to the Taitan. Moreover, the capital is heavily guarded. If someone transported the treasure in, your majesty would have discovered it long ago. This time, Tian Jizi has made some kind of trap to help the Taitan. I hope that your majesty will not be so gullible. Li Qitian nodded and pretended to trust him. You are right. I also think so. However, Li Qitian's heart was full of doubts. Pang Zhishi was almost successfully impeached by his people last time. Why would he sincerely help him this time? Could it be that the whereabouts of the treasure were really discovered? Was that why he deliberately said this to mislead him so that he would not be able to obtain the treasure? Thinking about it this way, Li Qitian began to believe that there was a treasure hidden in Chongshan. However, this was not difficult. Li Qitian made up his mind and ordered, immediately dispatch 3,000 soldiers from the 5 military barracks to surround the Chongshan Imperial Mausoleum. I want to see if the so-called Yan Dragon vein at the bottom of the mountain is real or fake. Pang Zhao immediately frowned slightly. He did not expect that Li Qitian would directly send people to surround the Imperial Mausoleum in Chongshan. It was the same as the Dain's old capital, to prevent the treasure from slipping away. But what if this was the result that the Tian Jizi wanted? Wouldn't they have fallen into a trap? Pang Zhao wanted to persuade him again, but on second thought, he understood why Li Qitian suddenly became radical. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows in amusement. It seemed that his bluntness had made Li Qitian even more suspicious. No matter what he said, Li Qitian would think that he was up to no good, so he didn't intend to say more. The birthday banquet was ruined by this unforeseen event, and everyone was no longer in the mood. However, after hurriedly finishing the formalities, they went their separate ways. Not to mention how sad the Empress Dowager would be when she returned to Ci and Palace, she would not even be happy with the birthday celebration. Qin Yining and Pang Zhao sat in the carriage back to the mansion, thinking about what happened today. Tell me, what is Tian Jizi's intention? Qin Yining leaned on Pang Zhao as a backrest, and Pang Zhao also opened his arms to hug him, trying to reduce the bumps of the carriage as much as possible. Pang Zhao's low voice sounded like he was pouring out his heart, and he patiently coaxed Qin Yining, "Don't worry about these things. Let's just live in the mansion and not get involved in the disturbances outside." Qin Yining rubbed the space between his eyebrows and said tiredly, "I don't want to worry. However, the fact that Tian Jizi wanted to kill me several times is not false. She is full of hostility to me, but I am not sure about you. This time, she first came to remind you that I can be safe in the mansion, and then she turned around and went to the palace to light a big firecracker. I heard people say that pregnancy makes a woman stupid for 3 years. I feel that my brain is not enough now." Pang Zhao carefully removed the heavy jewelry and phoenix ornaments on her head, and let her long hair fall down. He simply tied it up with a hair tie, and then gently massaged her temples. Qin Yining sighed comfortably, and gave more weight to the person behind him. "I didn't feel that wearing heavy makeup before, maybe I am used to being sloppy at home. Even if you don't comb your hair or wash your face, you are still the most beautiful." His lips brushed the side of Qin Yining's ear, causing Qin Yining to shrink his neck and avoid it with a smile. Pang Zhao successfully changed the topic. However, when she returned to the mansion, in the dead of night and insomnia, she would still guess the purpose of Tian Jizi's visit. She could not figure it out. However, she could feel that whether it was her, Pang Xiao, or Li Qitian, they were all Tianjizi's pawns. Tianjizi was playing a very big game of chess. Such peaceful days had only passed for 2 days. On this afternoon, when Qin Yining just woke up for lunch, Lian Xiaozhou quickly ran in from outside the door. Older sister. Qin Yining smiled at Lian Xiaozhou and reached out to her. Lian Xiaozhou learned the rules from Bing Tang. Now, she called her Wang Fei in front of others, and she also tried to follow the rules in private. She would only call her older sister when she was too anxious or excited. What happened? You are sweating. Come and sit down. Lian Xiaozong's face was flushed red like a young girl's. She pointed outside the mansion and spoke slowly but clearly. Someone outside said that they found 2 carriages of treasures at the east and west gates. Qin Yining's eyes widened in surprise. He beckoned Lian Xiaozhou to sit next to her and took a handkerchief to wipe the sweat on her forehead. Little Kanji, you said that there were treasures outside. Have you confirmed that they were found? Yes. Lian Xiaozhou nodded seriously. I just heard them say it. There were carriages at the east and west gates. When I opened them, I saw that they were all antiques from the Yan dynasty. Qin Yining looked pensive. Did they go outside or inside? Lian Xiaozhou was stunned by the question and shook her head. She obviously did not know. At this moment, Bing Tang and Ji Yun came back together. When they saw Qin Yining talking to Lian Xiaozhou and Qin Yining's serious expression, they knew that Lian Xiaozhou had already told Qin Yining about the matter. Bing Tang tapped Lian Xiaozhou's cheek and said to Qin Yining, Wang Fei, a carriage of antiques from the Yan dynasty was found at the east and west gates. They were originally going to be transported outside, but they were stopped by the guards at the gates. This matter caused a huge commotion. Your Majesty was shocked and ordered his trusted aides, Chief Steward Li and Prince Consort Ji, to investigate. Now, we can confirm that those antiques are from the Dian dynasty. Qin Yining nodded slowly. Where are Wang Yi and my father? We called for the aides. They are all in the study in the outer courtyard. Bing Tang helplessly poked Lian Xiaozhou's forehead. We originally did not want to trouble Wang Fei. Who knew that this girl would speak so quickly? Qin Yining pulled Lian Xiaozhou's hand and praised, It is wrong that you did not tell me anything. Xiaokangi is better. Lian Xiaozhou nodded with a red face. In the future, I will tell Jijie. Wang Fei. Bing Tang was so angry at Lian Xiaozhou's traitor behavior that he scratched her. Lian Xiaozhou laughed and dodged. The two played a game of you chase, I hide in the room. The girls' clear and cheerful singing spread far and wide. Even the servant girls and grannies in the yard were infected by the laughter and couldn't help but smile. Compared to the relaxed atmosphere in the Wang Fu, Li Qitian was not happy at this time in the palace. He sat with a heavy expression behind the black table made of Polonia wood in the imperial study. He asked Ji Ziyu in front of him in a deep voice, Did you see clearly just now? Zhen's eyes are not bad. Are they really antiques from the Dian dynasty? Chapter 594. Ji Ziyu nodded and said in a low voice, They are indeed antiques, calligraphy, and paintings from the Yan dynasty. The items have already been delivered and are waiting for your Majesty to inspect them. Li Qitian sat in his original position with a gloomy expression. After thinking for a moment, he called someone to inspect the items. The two chests were made of camphor wood and had rivets embedded in the corners of the chests. When the chests were opened, there were square brocade boxes and long scrolls arranged in a disorderly manner inside. Li Qitian checked them one by one with a sullen expression. After confirming that they were indeed items from the Yan dynasty, he ordered someone to record the items and store them in the internal treasury. No one was allowed to touch them without permission. When he returned to the imperial study, Li Qitian frowned and rubbed his chin in deep thought. The study was so quiet that only the sound of light breathing and the faint sound of water dripping from the table could be heard. After a quarter of an hour, Li Qitian looked at Li Guanwen and asked, "Where are the Yuqi Yen and that old dog surnamed Gu?" Replying to Your Majesty, you previously ordered them to be locked up in the imperial prison. It has been a year since then, so they should still be there. Li Qitian immediately ordered, "Go and call the Yuqi Yen and Gu Shixiang over to me." "Yes, Your Majesty." Also, Li Qitian called over a trusted spy. "Keep an eye on the main subjects of the Yen dynasty who have surrendered to me. If there are any strange movements, report it immediately." "As you command." The spy bowed and retreated. After Li Guanwen and the spy had left, Li Qitian asked Jiziyu, "What do you think is going on?" Jiziyu lowered his eyes and said, "Replying to Your Majesty, this subject thinks that there is something fishy going on." What was the difference between this answer and not answering at all? Li Qitian had always known that Jiziyu was a man of few words. It was precisely because of his cold temperament that he would never beat around the bush or pretend to be attentive in front of him. That was why he had put him in an important position. Now that he heard this, Li Qitian did not suspect anything. He only sighed and said, "Zhen naturally knows that something is fishy. However, I originally thought that the treasure would definitely not be in the capital, but now it has happened. I suspect that there must be treasures hidden in the northern Ji Imperial Mausoleum at the foot of the mountain." Jiziyu thought for a moment and said, "I'm not sure, but the Tian Jizi is involved. I'm sure it's a Taitan conspiracy. After all, the situation between the two countries is tense. Even if we want to go to war, we need to use money." Li Qitian sighed and stood up. He paced back and forth with his hands behind his back. "We know what you mean. We also have our suspicions. But now that he had a chance to find the treasure, he shouldn't let go of this opportunity. If we find the treasure, we'll have the strength to deal with the Taitan barbarians." Jiziyu only nodded. Li Qitian said, "If the treasure is really in the capital, where would it be hidden? We suddenly feel that although the capital is known as the foot of the emperor, it's not completely impregnable." Li Qitian's voice was full of vicissitudes. This was because the relationships in the imperial court were too complicated. The surrendered officials of the northern Ji Imperial Mausoleum belonged to one faction, the nobles belonged to another faction, and the nobles belonged to another faction. The surrendered officials of the Yen dynasty and the people of the aristocratic families in the imperial court all belonged to another faction. Li Qitian could not find anyone who was completely loyal to him. The situation in the imperial court was complicated. It was not easy for Li Qitian to keep the balance. Now that he was facing internal and external troubles and the national treasury was empty, of course he would pay special attention to the appearance of the treasure. Jiziyu said, "Why don't Your Majesty first order people to secretly search for it in the city? As long as the city gates are guarded, if the treasure is really in the capital, I believe it won't be able to escape Your Majesty's eyes." "You're right." Li Qitian immediately ordered someone, "Tell the warden's office of the 5 cities that spies from other countries have infiltrated the capital. Let them investigate secretly. If they find traces of suspicious people, wandering monks, or hidden treasures, they have to come back immediately. They can't miss any clues." "Yes." The eunuch who received the order hurriedly went to pass on the imperial edict. At this time, Li Guanwen ran in from outside in a panic. "Your Majesty." Li Guanwen had been by Li Qitian's side for a long time. He was steady in his actions and knew when to relax. It was rare for him to be this unsteady. Seeing Li Guanwen like this, Li Qitian knew that something must have happened. Li Guanwen knelt down and bowed deeply. The county king of Yen and Gu Shixiang, who were imprisoned in the imperial prison, have both disappeared. In just one night, the two of them have disappeared. The lock was not touched and everything else is in good condition. It's as if the two of them have suddenly disappeared and never existed. Li Qitian's mind immediately buzzed. Tian Jizi gave him a hint. Then, the antiques of the Yen dynasty appeared at the city gates. Then, the original emperor of the Yen dynasty and his old officials disappeared from the imperial prison where they were imprisoned. Putting all these together, it was obvious that Li Qitian was aware that there was a huge conspiracy going on. Someone was playing chess behind the scenes and playing chess with him. Regardless of how angry Li Qitian was. At this time, Peng Xiao and Qin Huaiyuan were discussing the current situation with Xiaoyu and Su Weiji in the study of the outer courtyard. Qin Huaiyuan sipped his tea and said slowly, "We don't know the reason for this at the moment. But we can see that the city is going to be in chaos. With your Majesty's temperament, he'll definitely have people search every inch of the city for him. He'll probably be accused of being a bandit or a bandit. This way, it's hard to guarantee that the people's finances won't be damaged. It's not a good sign for the capital to be in chaos." Su Weiji and Xiaoyu looked at each other and then treated Qin Huaiyuan with even more respect. He was a capable official who had been removed from his position for no reason. Even though he was idle at home, he never forgot his duty to help the people. Now that something had happened, they weren't worried about him being the subject of the Yen dynasty's wrath. Instead, they were worried about whether the people in the capital would suffer. In terms of magnanimity, whether compared to Wang Yi or Qin Huaiyuan, he paled in comparison. Peng Xiao said, "Even if we're worried about these things, we can't interfere. If your Majesty can't find the whereabouts of the treasure, he'll have to ask the county king of Yen and the others. If the county king of Yen can't give a satisfactory answer, your Majesty will definitely suspect father-in-law. I think it's more important for us to find a way to solve this problem." Qin Huaiyuan waved his hand and smiled. "Your Majesty will definitely suspect me. But I think your Majesty suspects not only the Northern Ji and the Yen dynasty's surrendered officials, but also the various officials in the court. Your Majesty doesn't have complete control over any of them, including the nobles, the ancestors, and the old officials. Your Majesty will be the first to suspect me, but at the same time, he'll suspect all the officials who have power in his hands." At this point, Qin Huaiyuan smiled faintly and said, "I think, with your Majesty's temperament, he'll definitely put the people he's worried about right under his nose. Only then will he feel at ease, just like how the in-laws would often visit the palace as guests when you were away on campaign." Peng Xiao heard this and smiled bitterly and nodded. "Father-in-law is right. If that's the case, then whatever we think of now will be in vain." Chapter 595. That's not entirely true. Honorable son-in-law, don't be discouraged. Now that we've discussed countermeasures, it's better to nip the problem in the bud. Qin Huaiyuan comfortingly patted Peng Xiao's shoulder again. There was only trust and respect in his eyes. Peng Xiao's heart was moved. His admiration for his father now belonged to Qin Huaiyuan. He nodded solemnly and promised, "Father-in-law, don't worry. I'll definitely act cautiously. I'll be fully prepared in advance." "That's good. Since the matter is set, do your part well and treat it as normal. You're talented. Although you can't go all out now because of Sister Yi and the child in her belly, a tiger lying down is still a tiger. It's not a bad thing to take this opportunity to conserve energy." Peng Xiao was encouraged, and the worry and uneasiness that had been deeply hidden in his heart had completely dispersed. His eyes were bright and confident as usual. Xiaoyu and Su Weiji silently watched the interaction between Qin Huaiyuan and Peng Xiao. Their original admiration had now turned into joy and gratification. They were older and had followed Pang Xiao for many years. Although they were master and servant, they actually felt sorry for Pang Xiao, who had experienced many hardships at a young age. Pang Xiao didn't have a father to protect him since he was young. He was also forced to train on the battlefield. In his life, there were very few people who could wholeheartedly teach and advise him. Those who approached him either had something to ask of him or wanted to rely on him. Qin Huaiyuan not only cared about the people, but also could disregard former enmity. Looking at how he treated Pang Xiao, he gave him pointers and encouraged him when he needed to. It was obvious that he was teaching him like his own child. Such a father-in-law could be said to be a guiding light. To Pang Xiao, he had a special meaning and was very important. Xia Yu and Su Weiji now respected Qin Huaiyuan from the bottom of their hearts, just like how they respected Qin Yining. When they discussed the possible reactions of the palace, the atmosphere was warmer than usual. However, as expected, Li Qitian not only ordered the warden's office of the 5 cities to put the capital under martial law, he also sent more people to the imperial mausoleum in Chongshan to carry out a detailed investigation of the previous dynasty's imperial mausoleum. In just a few days, the commoners were already on tenterhooks. They all thought that some bandits had sneaked into the capital to kill people, so the streets were empty even before the curfew. The shops also closed their doors and refused to do business before nightfall. Li Qitian couldn't find the treasure and lost the Yuqi yen. He was more and more certain that the treasure must be in the imperial mausoleum. Perhaps there was a part of it in the capital. In the past few days, he had almost been possessed. Even the Empress Dowager and the Empress rarely went to their quarters. All day long, he was just trying to figure out the location of the hidden treasure. However, in the blink of an eye, it was already the 5th day of the 9th month. The underground palace and the imperial mausoleum had been pried open. Even the coffin of the northern Ji Kingdom's emperor was almost exposed, but the treasure was still nowhere to be seen. Li Qitian also suspected that Tian Jizi was deliberately mystifying and playing with him. However, in the past few days, he had caught many monks and Taoists, but he didn't see Tian Jizi. It was this person who disappeared completely under the strict interrogation at the city gate, as if he had never appeared. This made Li Qitian even more suspicious. Qin Yining didn't sleep well these days. The 2 little guys in her belly were very lively. In addition, she often woke up late at night. The hot autumn was still raging. Qin Yining had faint dark circles under her eyes. One day, she was standing in the corridor with her hands on her waist, watching Bing Tang and Lian Xiaozhou play chicken and shuttlecock. Suddenly, she heard a noise coming from outside the courtyard wall. Lian Xiaozhou and Bing Tang stopped playing. Ji Yun went out to inquire. Not long after, she came back and reported, "Wang Fei, there's nothing big outside. Someone from the palace came to pass on your majesty's verbal order to invite Wang Yi into the palace to talk." As soon as she finished speaking, Peng Xiao had already entered the courtyard. "Girl, you're quite talkative." Peng Xiao smiled at Ji Yun without any anger. Ji Yun bowed and retreated to the side with her head lowered. Qin Yining stretched out her arm. Peng Xiao immediately came forward to hold her hand and said, "Why are you standing here? Are you tired?" "I'm fine." "Why did your majesty suddenly summon you? Did he only pass it to you, or did he also pass it to others?" Peng Xiao helped Qin Yining back to the room. She sat on the Kong bed by the window and said, "It's not just me. It said that the old officials of Northern Ji, the officials who surrendered on the Dian, and the nobles, were all invited into the palace." Qin Yining frowned and muttered, "Today is already the 5th day of the lunar month. The letter that day said that the golden light appeared on the 9th day of the 9th month." "That's right. It's precisely because the date is approaching that your majesty is anxious." During this period of time, we've already dug up the graves. It's only the children who made some funerary objects. Whether or not he found any traps, he should be impatient. This time, he called all of you in because he's suspicious. Pang Xiao smiled and nodded. She hugged Qin Yining and said, "Great minds think alike. With his temperament, we can naturally figure out his actions after interacting with him for a long time. This time, there must be no progress in the capital and the imperial mausoleum. He also completely believes in the matter of the treasure. If he can't find it, he'll be suspicious everywhere. It's not that I'm arrogant, but if he's suspicious, I'll be the first to bear the brunt. The other important officials are also on the list of suspects. It's because we can't be sure who's behind the matter of the treasure. He'll definitely cast a wide net and catch everyone in one fell swoop. Only by keeping all the suspicious people in front of him can he be sure." Qin Yining said worriedly, "So if you go this time, you'll have to stay for a few more days. The situation in the palace is treacherous and unpredictable. Can we think of a way not to go?" Pang Xiao smiled and said, "That's an imperial edict. This isn't the time to openly defy the edict and have a falling out. Especially now, that person's eyes are red." Qin Yining rubbed his round belly and sighed, "Our child came too early. Actually, the current situation isn't suitable for me to peacefully conceive. The imperial court has changed so much. If you want to protect the safety of us, you'll have to make a lot of sacrifices." Qin Yining knew that with Pang Xiao's personality, if it was in the past, he would be unhappy and wouldn't make things difficult for others. However, he would be able to find an irrefutable reason to resist the imperial edict. Li Qitian allowed so many people to enter the palace this time. It was clear that he was putting them under house arrest. If things went wrong, he would break them one by one and ask about the whereabouts of the treasure. If Pang Xiao went, Qin Yining was really afraid that he would be in danger. However, Pang Xiao couldn't back down now. He also couldn't complicate matters. The current Pang Xiao had to be strong even if he was a dragon. He had to do his best to support Qin Yining and his child. No matter what he did, he had to wait until after Qin Yining gave birth. Now, everything had to be stable. Pang Xiao squeezed Qin Yining's hand and said with a smile, "Look at you. You're sighing again. Be careful that the child you give birth to in the future will be like a little old man." Qin Yining couldn't help but chuckle when he heard this. Knowing that he was deliberately comforting her, he sighed and said, "Even if you want to enter the palace, you can't leave without a way out. If your Majesty's orders have any weaknesses that can be used against you, you should come home and try not to go to the palace. Don't worry. Perhaps you've guessed wrongly. Your Majesty isn't crazy. Why would he put all the ministers under house arrest?" Chapter 596. Before Pang Xiao entered the palace, he only bid farewell to Qin Yining and did not disturb anyone else. He only brought Jinghu Wei with him, and when he arrived at the palace gates, he could not bring this one attendant inside. However, Pang Xiao had already entrusted all matters outside the palace to Qin Huayuan. He also ordered Xiaoyu, Su Weiji, and other advisors to listen to Qin Huayuan's instructions. Jinghu Wei was led by Huzi and was completely under Qin Huayuan's control. Qin Huayuan sent Pang Xiao off to the Zi sect with a gentle smile on his face, making those who saw him feel particularly at ease. Pang Xiao cupped his hands in salute to Qin Huayuan, then turned around and elegantly mounted his horse and left. Qin Huayuan leisurely ordered his men to tightly close the gates of the prince's residence. He then led his men around the residence and carefully inquired about the guard shifts. After careful consideration, he made appropriate adjustments. It took more than an hour for Qin Huayuan's patrol to arrive at Yao Qinggu's residence before Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan learned of Pang Xiao's departure. Yao Qinggu boasted of his intelligence, and he never doubted his own talent and ability. When he was running the restaurant, he never lost to anyone. Occasionally, he would criticize Pang Xiao about the current situation, and he was able to see through the situation and speak his mind. However, the last time he met Qin Huaiyuan, the other party had used banknotes to ruthlessly slap him in the face. From then on, Yao Qinggu knew that there was always a taller mountain. In front of Qin Huaiyuan, an old fox who had experienced the ups and downs of the imperial court for many years and who had remained standing despite the changes in the imperial court, his cleverness seemed to be seen through at a glance. In addition, although Qin Huaiyuan's in-laws had not come to question them about the safflower incident, Yao Qinggu suspected that Qin Huaiyuan had known about it long ago and simply did not say anything. Thus, when they met today, Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, "Wang Yi has been summoned to the palace and has handed over the matters of the residents to me to handle. Old Master Qin Huaiyuan is experienced and knowledgeable. If you have any suggestions, please do not hesitate to raise them." For a moment, Yao Qinggu could not even find the words to refute. He could only smile and exchange pleasantries before politely sending the guest off. After Qin Huaiyuan had left with his men, the Yao clan, who had been silent all this time, speak with dissatisfaction, Qin Huaiyuan's Dai Fu Nao's heart. In the past, he had followed the example of the great clans. As long as he was in the capital, he would have to meet them sooner or later. But now, he had thrown the rules to the back of his head. "You've really married a meddlesome daughter-in-law. You've forgotten everything after a pillow talk. That's enough." Yao Qinggu was a bit impatient. "If you weren't so stupid as to directly poison your daughter-in-law with safflower, would Dai Fu have distanced himself from you and me? Dai Fu is not an unfilial person. As a mother, you almost killed his flesh and blood. You didn't even say anything nice and refused to admit defeat. How can Dai Fu forgive you?" Yao clan frowned in grievance. "It was father's idea. No matter how I persuade him, it's all my fault." Yao Qinggu waved his hand impatiently. "You're just a useless person. I really don't want to bother with your matters anymore." After saying that, Yao Qinggu turned and went back into the room. Yao clan stood in the courtyard for a long time, unable to regain her senses. Did she really become a lonely person who was not loved by her father, mother, or son? Lian Xiaozhou leaned over and whispered in Qin Yining's ear. She clumsily repeated the conversation between Yao clan and Yao Qinggu to Qin Yining. "Older sister, it's old master and old madam's fault." Qin Yining smiled and patted Lian Xiaozhou's hand. "I know. Let's just let this matter pass. We know what's going on in our hearts. We just need to be on guard." Lian Xiaozhou pursed her lips and felt indignant in her heart. Qin Yining's power and prestige could be used in front of others, but in front of Pang Zhao's family, it was not important. She didn't want to think too much about it. Qin Yining turned to order Lian Xiaozhou, "Tell Huan Xiaozhou to pay more attention to the main door. If Wang Yi has any news, tell her to immediately report back to me." Lian Xiaozhou nodded and went out to pass on the message. Bing Tang came in with a bowl of miscarriage prevention medicine and said with a smile, "Princess consort, don't spoil Xiao Yan too much. She's been very naughty recently and won't abide by many rules." Qin Yining took the small white porcelain bowl and drank the medicine in one gulp. Then, she rinsed her mouth with warm water. She wiped the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief and said, "She doesn't have any bad intentions. She's wholeheartedly doing this for me. Moreover, she suffered so much when she was young. I always want to indulge her a little more. It's not a big deal, so let her be." Ji Yun and Xian Yun came in with tea, snacks, and fruits. They said in unison, "I've never seen Princess Consort dote on us so much." "That's right, Princess Consort is very biased." The few of them deliberately joked to relieve Qin Yining's boredom. Although Qin Yining wasn't in a good mood, she still accepted their good intentions and tried not to let others feel worried. That night, Pang Xiao really didn't come back. She sent Jinghu Wei, who was accompanying her, to come back and deliver a message. Princess Consort, don't worry. Our people in the palace said that Wang Yi is well. Your Majesty has invited many ministers to gather in Yangxin Palace Hall for a discussion. Wang Yi, Prince Consort Ji, and Lu Boi are all there. There are also some loyal ministers in the court. I think that with so many loyal ministers gathered together, nothing will happen. Qin Yining nodded and massaged her sore waist. Xian Yun and Ji Yun immediately stood beside her and massaged her. Qin Yining naturally knew that Li Qitian wouldn't be so stupid as to gather all his loyal ministers in one place and catch them all in one net. That was equivalent to destroying the Great Wall. With such internal and external troubles, if he really did that, wouldn't Wudajin Khan laugh to death? However, she was in someone else's territory, so she couldn't feel at ease. She didn't know how long Li Qitian was going to hold her captive. As the important ministers of the imperial court were left in Yangxin Palace Hall to discuss important matters, the capital and the imperial mausoleum in Chongshan were also meticulously searching for the whereabouts of the treasure. However, even though Li Qitian had all the suspects in front of him, there was still no news of the treasure. If he hadn't already intercepted 2 carriages of Dian antiques and treasures, Li Qitian would almost believe Pang Xiao's words. Pang Xiao was left by Li Qitian's side, but she was worried about Qin Yining's situation in the residence. She stayed 2 nights in Yangxin Palace Hall and found a place to sleep. Pang Xiao didn't feel bitter, but she became more and more anxious. It seemed that Li Qitian planned to keep them in custody until the 9th day of the lunar month. Pang Xiao was worried about Qin Yining in the palace, but Qin Yining was even more worried about Pang Xiao. 1 or 2 days would be fine, but now it seemed that Li Qitian didn't plan to let them go until they found the treasure. Pang Xiao didn't have any subordinates in the palace that she could use. If Li Qitian wanted to do something, what if Pang Xiao couldn't prevent it? The more Qin Yining thought about it, the more anxious he became. Early in the morning on the 9th day of the lunar month, Huzi ran in with news. Wang Fei, this morning Your Majesty took the ministers who stayed in Yangxin Palace Hall these days and left for the Imperial Mausoleum in Chongshan before dawn. Qin Yining was surprised. Everyone? Yes. Huzi nodded. Qin Yining couldn't help but shake his head, and the worry on his face deepened. After sending Huzi away, Qin Yining sat in front of the table and thought about what happened at the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet. What does Yan Dragon Vein, the bottom of Chongshan, the 9th day of the lunar month, the golden light appears mean? Qin Yining frowned as he muttered to himself. Lian Xiaozhou and Bing Tang came in together with trays. When they heard Qin Yining talking to himself, Lian Xiaozhou said, Chongshan is the imperial mausoleum. Why would the golden light appear on the 9th day of the lunar month? Without waiting for Qin Yining to reply, Bing Tang said, the capital has been under martial law for the past few days. Isn't everyone looking for the Yan dynasty's treasure? If the golden light appears on the 9th day of the lunar month, it probably means that the treasure will appear on the 9th day of the lunar month. Lian Xiaozhou nodded, then shook her head, but why would the Yan dynasty's treasure be at the bottom of Chongshan? The bottom of Chongshan is clearly filled with corpses. When Qin Yining heard this, the teacup that he had just picked up fell to the ground. He grabbed Lian Xiaozhou and asked anxiously, what did you say? Lian Xiaozhou was in pain from being grabbed, but she didn't break free. She looked at Bing Tang and said seriously, Sister, I don't remember very clearly. I just vaguely remember Uncle saying that my father was worried that after the city fell, the rebels would humiliate the imperial mausoleum and trample on the corpses of the previous empresses. So, he buried a lot of corpses in the underground palace of Chongshan. Qin Yining let go of her in a panic and muttered, the 9th day of the lunar month, the golden light appears. Could it be, someone come? Qin Yining's voice was extremely sharp when he said the last sentence. Xian Yun and Ji Yun, who were walking slowly in the courtyard, were frightened by Qin Yining's voice. Even Madame Ma, who was in the side room, heard the sound and quickly ran over. Sister Yi, what happened? Why do you look so pale? Qin Yining couldn't care less about Madame Ma and hurriedly ordered Ji Yun, quickly call Huzi over. Hurry! Ji Yun saw that Qin Yining's face had turned pale. She hurriedly nodded and ran out with all her might. Madame Ma supported Qin Yining. Silly child, you can't be anxious about your health. Sit down quickly and let that Bing Tang girl take a look. Grandmother, I'm fine. Qin Yining forced herself to calm down. However, her hands kept trembling and her palms were sweating. Bing Tang heard everything clearly just now and was also burning with anxiety. She checked Qin Yining's pulse and persuaded, don't worry, princess consort. Wang Yi will be fine. You have to take care of yourself. Even if it's not for yourself, you have to do it for the little heir. Qin Yining pursed her lips and didn't say a word. Her heart was already in a mess. Her mind was filled with the scene of the being ignited and exploded. Beiji's imperial mausoleum was located in Mount Zhong. Once it was ignited, whether it was an explosion or the collapse of the underground palace, the consequences would be unbearable. No wonder Tian Jizi reminded Pang Xiao not to go out. However, because she was pregnant, Pang Xiao followed the imperial edict this time for her safety. What if something really happened? Qin Yining didn't want Madame Ma to worry, so she persuaded Madame Ma to go back and rest first and let Xian Yun stay by Madame Ma's side to serve her. Princess consort. At this moment, Huzi rushed into the room and bowed to Qin Yining. Qin Yining took a deep breath and calmed down a little before saying, immediately take 2 people and take the Wang Estate's waste token to Mount Zhong. You must catch up to Wang Yi. There's in the underground palace of Mount Zhong. Remind them not to enter the underground palace and not to go near Mount Zhong. When Huzi heard this, she was immediately scared out of her wits. She responded in a panic and hurriedly ran out. Qin Yining's hands kept trembling. After thinking for a while, she stood up and said, immediately order someone to prepare a carriage and call a few Jinghu Wei to accompany me. Bing Tang, Ji Yun, the 2 of you follow me. Princess consort, you can't do that. How can you go out rashly now? She could not help but feel a lump in her throat, but she forced herself to hold it in. Qin Huaiyuan walked closer and comforted her with a smile. Well, don't be anxious. I know what happened. This matter can't be rushed. I will think of a way. Qin Yining nodded and felt a little relieved. This was the advantage of being with her parents and family. She was not as helpless as she was when she was in Taitan and Xia. Now she had parents, relatives, and trustworthy friends by her side. She was not alone and helpless. Father, does the rest of the family know about this matter? Don't worry. I didn't say anything. But you were in a mess just now. Perhaps you scared old madam. How are you going to explain it to her later? Qin Yining's face was a little hot. She was so anxious that she cried just now. Her father seemed to have seen it. She rarely showed her weak side in front of others. She also rarely showed weakness in front of Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan. Now that she was in a mess because of Pang Xiao, she inevitably felt embarrassed. When Qin Huaiyuan saw his daughter like this, he sighed and patted her on the shoulder. My child, you were not destined to be by my side since you were a child. Don't you have to shoulder everything outside by yourself? That's why you're so stubborn and unwilling to admit defeat. I see that you are so independent and strong. You're different from the majority of women nowadays. You won't live with a man as your sky. It's very comforting. At least if you meet a heartless man, you won't be unable to live like other women. You can live independently. Qin Huaiyuan changed the topic and patted her head tenderly. But look at you. You want to shoulder everything by yourself. You're only 18 years old, but your mind is more mature than an adult's. I can't feel happy at all. It is because of your parents' dereliction of duty that you have to be strong. Father, don't say that. Qin Yining touched her forehead uncomfortably. Fate is like this. I believe that you must have been forced to sow discord in Beiji. Although you incurred revenge, you still protected your family. Moreover, Sister Hui took care of my parents for me all those years. My parents never lacked a daughter in their lives. The family did not lose anything when they suddenly discovered my existence. I think this is already a very good result. Qin Huaiyuan felt ashamed and distressed when he heard this. His daughter was a good child who looked at the big picture. What she considered first was the clan, then herself. She considered the gains and losses of the entire family, and also the feelings of her parents. Indeed, as she said, when they discovered her existence, ordered people to investigate and bring her back, Qin Huaiyuan and the family Qin were only shocked and distressed for a short while. However, she endured 14 years of hardship and loneliness outside. When Sister Hui was 8 years old, she was a noble young lady. Sister Yi, on the other hand, had to hide in the mountains alone since she was 8 years old. She relied on hunting and digging for herbs and wild vegetables to survive in exchange for food. Qin Huaiyuan sometimes thought that if his subordinates had not coincidentally met Qin Yining, or if Qin Yining had not lived to 14 years old, Qin Huaiyuan would not have known that the child he raised was not his biological child. As long as no one exposed him, he could continue to live a carefree life. The only one who suffered was this child. Qin Huaiyuan's expression was so sad that Qin Yining felt sad. She quickly tugged on Qin Huaiyuan's sleeve and said, "Father, don't think too much about the past. Look, aren't we living very well now?" When Qin Huaiyuan heard this, he smiled and nodded. Ji Yun, Bing Tang, and the others saw that Qin Huaiyuan was able to divert Qin Yining's attention with just a few words and temporarily stop worrying about Pang Xiao. Qin Yining's face became a little rosier, and she could not help but feel admiration for her father. As expected of the wise Panin, nothing seemed to be a problem in front of him. He could solve anything. With Qin Huaiyuan around, they all seemed to have a backbone. Qin Huaiyuan and Qin Yining sat down to talk. Although Qin Yining was worried about the Chongshan incident, she felt a little more at ease with her father around. She did not feel the passage of time. It was not until 2 hours later that the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard from the courtyard. Princess Consort. Huzi. Qin Yining stood up and walked to the door. Huzi's face was bruised, his nose was bruised, and his hair was disheveled. It was obvious that he had fought with someone. Qin Yining asked, "How did you end up like this? Did you deliver the message?" Bing Tang went to check on his injuries, but Huzi gently pushed her hand away. "Princess Consort, the message was not delivered. I brought 2 of my brothers to Chongshan and showed the Wang Mansion's token. However, the surrounding area of Chongshan was filled with people that Your Majesty had arranged to be transferred to the Jingji barracks. We were not familiar with them, and they had received an imperial edict. Not even a fly is allowed to enter. I tried to persuade them, but they did not believe me. They even said that the Wang Mansion must have ulterior motives. Not only did they not allow us to enter to pass on the message, they also did not help us pass on the message. My brothers fought without saying anything, but in the end, even a tiger could not defeat a pack of wolves. Those 2 brothers did not receive Wang Ye's orders, and they could not kill anyone for fear of ruining the plan. It was inevitable that their hands and feet were tied. They were not careful and were captured alive. I was also clever and ran out to deliver the message when they were not paying attention. Chapter 598. Huzi frowned and said bluntly, "If this was in the past, it would be easy. But this time, Your Majesty is determined to get the treasure and has put in a lot of effort. The people who surround Zone Mountain are all elites of the capital barracks. They have a sentry every 5 steps and a sentry every 10 steps. They have made up their mind to not allow anyone to enter or leave. If we want to arrange for people to quietly sneak in, I'm afraid it will be difficult." Qin Yining was at a loss. Sending a message was blocked. Asking to see Your Majesty was blocked outside. Sneaking in was also not possible. What should he do? Qin Huaiyuan muttered to himself for a moment and made a prompt decision. Now, we need to make 3 preparations. Send people to rush over with the Wang Fu token. Pay attention to this group of people and don't force their way in, so as to avoid angering the soldiers surrounding the capital barracks and causing an even bigger conflict. If the message is not passed, Wang Yi will be labeled as a traitor. Father is right. Qin Yining nodded in agreement. Qin Huaiyuan continued, at the same time, Sister Yi will go with father. Father is now a commoner. I'm afraid I don't have enough power to convince the soldiers guarding the place to let us go. All right. Qin Yining said, I also have the same intention. I will go and persuade them. On the other hand, if it doesn't work, I plan to have people force their way in. With me present, they will be afraid of Wang Yi and will definitely have some restraining fear. Bing Tang frowned and estimated the state of Qin Yining's body. Ji Yun objected, Old Master's words are indeed reasonable. But what if Wang Fei's body can't take it? Why don't we go into the palace and report to the Empress Dowager? The Empress Dowager is worried about Your Majesty and will definitely make a move. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and nodded, saying, What you say makes sense. However, the Empress Dowager can't be seen immediately. She will have to pass on the message layer by layer. If we send people to Zone Mountain to pass on the decree, I'm afraid it will be too late. Ji Yun blushed and said in shame, It's this servant's fault for not thinking things through. It's all right. You're just worried about Sister Yi's health. Qin Huaiyuan continued, After we leave, the safety of the estate will be handed over to Mr. Xia and Mr. Su. As for the family Qin, I'm afraid we'll have to trouble bodyguard Chao. Qin Yining nodded and said, Then let's do that. I'll order people to prepare the carriages, horses, and poles. Just leave the rest to me. Huzi, just go and gather Jinghu Wei. Huzi nodded. Yes. Breaking into Chongshan Imperial Mausoleum by force was tantamount to disobeying the imperial edict. It was very likely that they would be charged with treason. However, none of them were afraid. Huzi and his group of Jinghu Wei had long wanted to roll up their sleeves and go all out. While everyone was preparing, Mrs. Ma walked to the door of Qin Yining's office worriedly. Lassie, did something happen to Dai Fu? Grandmother. Qin Yining went up to Mrs. Ma and held her hand. Don't worry, nothing happened outside. I'm just being paranoid. Lass, you're still hiding it from me. Just now, your expression changed. I saw it clearly. Mrs. Ma sighed and said, I've been on tenterhooks for as many years as Dai Fu has been fighting outside. In fact, I've long been used to being worried about him. This time, Dai Fu was summoned. Did something happen again? Looking into Mrs. Ma's wise eyes, Qin Yining really couldn't say anything perfunctory. Mrs. Ma was a strong woman and was very clear-headed about things. Moreover, if she and her father went out, none of the remaining masters in the prince's mansion would be able to stand up. There were countless bombs in Chongshan Underground Palace, and no one knew when those bombs would be ignited under Tian Jizi's calculations. In fact, Qin Yining was already risking her life to go with her father this time. She was mentally prepared. However, she had to go because of Pang Xiao. In addition to Pang Xiao, Qin Huayuan was also doing it for the imperial court. Even if Qin Huayuan didn't say it out loud, Qin Yining understood that Qin Huayuan was going with her for the sake of the important officials in the imperial court. He definitely didn't want to see all the capable officials in Dezhou get wiped out in one fell swoop. If that happened, the people of Dezhou would be exposed to the Taitan's iron hooves. If something happened to them outside, the prince's mansion would lose its backbone. On the family Qin side, there were still second old master and third old master, as well as Qin Han, Qin Yu, and Qin Xian. However, on the prince's mansion side, there were only Yao Qinggu, the Yao clan, and Madame Ma left. At the crucial moment, Madame Ma was still needed to control the situation so that the prince's mansion wouldn't fall into chaos. She also didn't want Xiaoyu and Su Weiji to be controlled by Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan. Thinking of this, Qin Yining pulled Madame Ma's hand and sat down on the Arhat bed. He explained the matter to Madame Ma in a low voice. Qin Yining was afraid that Madame Ma wouldn't be able to take it. Father and I will go to Chongshan Underground Palace to explore. I am pregnant and also the consort of the Prince Zhongshuan. Presumably, because of Wang Yi, the Jingji guards won't do anything to me. If we are so serious, most of them will listen to us. Right now, the situation inside is unknown. Moreover, I only guessed that there was a bomb in the underground palace. I can't confirm it. We are going there just in case. Grandmother, you really don't have to worry about this matter. Madame Ma was stunned for a long time before she patted the back of Qin Yining's hand and sighed, "You child, I know that you are a steady person. If you don't have a certain degree of certainty, you won't make such a big fuss and panic. Grandmother won't ask you how you guessed that there was a bomb in the underground palace. Grandmother doesn't understand the matters of you young people. I only have one request. You must listen to me. Grandmother, please tell me. I will listen." "Okay," Madame Ma grabbed Qin Yining's hand and said seriously, "I know that you have a good relationship with Dai Fu. When you went missing, grandmother still remembers how Dai Fu was like. Whenever I think of it, my heart aches. I can see that you two want to be together in life and death. If anything happens to Dai Fu this time, you must be strong. Because you are Dai Fu's wife and the only matriarch of the Pang family. You are pregnant with Dai Fu's flesh and blood. You are the continuation of Dai Fu's life and the only continuation of the Pang family's bloodline. Do you understand?" Madame Ma's hand was very cold. She held Qin Yining's hand tightly, leaving red scratch marks on the back of her fair and delicate hand. However, Qin Yining did not feel the pain at all. She was using all her energy to hold back her tears. "I understand. Swear to grandmother that you will not hurt yourself. Your safety is the most important thing. If anything happens to Dai Fu, you will not die for love." Qin Yining's eyes were wet. She pursed her lips and nodded. "I swear that I will not hurt myself. My safety is the most important thing. I will not die for love. Grandmother, don't worry. Wang Yi will be fine." Madame Ma's eyes were red, but she was so strong that she did not shed a single tear. Instead, she smiled and nodded to comfort Qin Yining. "That boy is tough. You don't have to worry. He didn't learn martial arts for nothing. Even if something really happens, he has the ability to protect himself and escape unscathed. He is worried about you. He will definitely not let anything happen to himself. You have to believe in his ability, understand?" Qin Yining nodded and rested her head on Madame Ma's shoulder. She said in a muffled voice, "Grandmother, don't worry. We will all be fine." Madame Ma's wrinkled hand gently patted Qin Yining's back. "Don't worry. I will stay at home. The house will not be in chaos. Come back as soon as possible. If there is any news, tell me as soon as possible." "Okay, I will listen to grandmother." The mother and daughter relied on each other to comfort each other. The Sun clan was useless. Qin Yining did not dare to tell his biological mother about these things. However, Madame Ma took the pressure on behalf of the Sun clan and gave Qin Yining the concern of a female elder. Bing Tang, Ji Yun, Xian Yun, and Lian Xiaozhou all quietly wiped their tears. Qin Yining went out with Bing Tang and Ji Yun. Xian Yun and Lian Xiaozhou stayed behind to follow Madame Ma. Qin Huaiyuan entrusted the security of the entire Wang mansion to Chao Yuqing, Jing Jie, and a few silver-masked spies. Then, he handed the soldiers of the Wang mansion to Xiaoyu and Su Weiji. He explained the stakes to them and ordered them not to spread the news and cause panic. Qin Yining then got in the car and went out with Qin Huaiyuan. From the beginning to the end, the Sun clan and the others did not know what Qin Yining was going to do. They thought that Qin Huaiyuan wanted to take his daughter out for a stroll. The wheels of the carriage were wrapped in cotton wool, and the inside of the carriage was covered with thick mattresses. It was not so hot in September. Qin Yining sat in the carriage. Although he felt uncomfortable, it was not very unbearable. Qin Huaiyuan rode beside the carriage on a horse. After a while, he would ask Qin Yining what he thought. He was fully prepared and had Bing Tang to observe the situation at all times. Qin Yining's heart was tense. Naturally, nothing was more important than reporting to Pang Shao. In the time it took to burn 3 sticks of incense, they still walked for an hour before arriving. Prince Zhongshuan's carriage had the emblem of Prince Zhongshuan's mansion. Behind the carriage, there were several Jinghu Wei who were as strong as wolves and tigers. Looking at the neat formation and the valiant aura around them, one could tell at a glance that they were truly fierce warriors who had drunk blood. The Jingji guards who were guarding the imperial mausoleum of Chongshan were arguing with Huzi and the others who had arrived first. The atmosphere was already tense. When they saw a group of people rushing over from afar, they felt that the situation was not right. Could it be that the people of Prince Zhongshuan wanted to rebel? A captain led more than 10 people around Huzi and came face to face with them. He asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" Qin Yining had just taken a pill to prevent miscarriage in the carriage. Hearing the captain's question, he lifted the curtain and got off the carriage with the help of Bing Tang and Ji Yun. Qin Huaiyuan dismounted and cupped his hands towards the captain. He said, "I am the former Minister of Rights, Qin Mang." Wasn't the former Minister of Rights, Qin Mang, Prince Zhongshuan's father-in-law, old Taishan? The Jingji guards looked at each other in dismay. They then looked at the beautiful woman with a big belly who was dressed in a honey-colored brocade robe and an ivory-colored long skirt. She was undoubtedly Prince Zhongshuan's consort. Qin Yining held Bing Tang's hand and slowly walked forward. He held the Prince Zhongshuan's token and said with a sharp gaze, "Greetings, Darren. I am Prince Zhongshuan's consort. Your Majesty's safety is very important. I hope that Your Majesty can be a bit more lenient and let us in to report to Your Majesty. If you are worried, you can go in and pass on the message. Otherwise, if you delay the important matter, it is not something that you and I can take responsibility for." What a joke. Your Majesty ordered us to guard Chongshan and not allow anyone to enter or leave. Prince Zhongshuan's residence has repeatedly sent people to provoke us. Do you not take Your Majesty's decree seriously? Or do you want to rebel? Chapter 599. The captain snorted, "Stop talking nonsense. Do you think there's a bomb just because you say so? Do you have any evidence? Huzi saw that the captain was being disrespectful to Qin Huaiyuan, so he rebuked, evidence. If it really explodes and everyone is blown up, what's the point of having evidence then? How dare you? This place is strictly guarded by your majesty. How can we allow you to cause trouble again and again? If you don't back down, don't blame us for being impolite. As soon as the captain finished speaking, he pulled out his long sword and revealed the cold, snow-white blade. The Jingji guards behind him also pulled out their swords and sabers. Wang Fei. Huzi moved to block Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Ji Yun behind him and also pulled out his weapon. Qin Yining supported his waist with one hand and patted Huzi's shoulder with the other, hinting for him to back down. Huzi's face was bruised and he glared fiercely at the captain. In the end, he still obeyed and sheathed his sword and stepped aside. Qin Yining took a step forward and faced the captain's blade. He said without a trace of fear, "Sir, I don't have time to talk to you here. You have to know that if we delay here for a while, your majesty will be in more danger. You are indeed loyal and courageous to obey his majesty's orders. However, you also need to know how to be flexible. It's fine if you don't trust us and don't want to let us in. You can order someone to go in and pass on the message. Is it that difficult to just send one person to pass on a message to your majesty? Once the bomb explodes, what will happen to your majesty, Wang Yi, the clan relatives, and the important officials in the court? If something happens to these people, can you bear the responsibility and revenge of the Empress Dowager, the Empress, and the officials' families? I'll count to 10. If you order someone to go in and pass on the message to your majesty, then it's fine. If you don't, I can only order someone to barge in. The child in my belly is Prince Zhongshuan's son. If you hurt me, just wait for Wang Yi to come out and attack. 1. Qin Yining raised a finger that was as white as jade on his left hand. His voice was steady. The lieutenant's face was gloomy. Facing such a strong Wang Fei, after thinking about it, he could not make up his mind. 2. If he didn't let them through and something really happened, the Empress Dowager and the clan relatives would blame him. How could he, a mere Jingji guard officer, bear the responsibility? 3. In any case, it was the Prince Zhongshuan's consort who brought the news. If it was true, he could record it as a great merit. If it was false, he could just push the people of the prince's mansion to take the blame. 4. 5. Qin Yining switched from his left hand to his right. His posture was outstanding and his gaze was sharp. Even though he was pregnant and gave others the impression that he was weak from the back, his imposing manner made the Jinghu Wei guards in front of him fearful. The Jinghu Wei guards who came with him were also very excited. His Highness was indeed not an ordinary person. Even his wife was so amazing. 8. 9. Good. I promise you. Under Qin Yining's pressure, the lieutenant thought about it and finally thought it through. Wang Fei, please don't be angry. This one is just following orders. Your Majesty doesn't allow anyone to disturb him. It's really inappropriate to disturb him, but for the sake of your Majesty's safety, this one can only take the risk. Qin Yining withdrew his hand and said with a gentle expression, then I'll have to trouble Darren. Please immediately send someone into the underground palace to tell your Majesty, the nobles, and the ministers to immediately withdraw from the underground palace. After checking to make sure that there are no corpses, if your Majesty wants to punish anyone, I'll be right here. Qin Yining's voice was not loud, nor did he speak quickly. However, when his words fell into the ears of the lieutenant, they had no choice but to take him seriously. The lieutenant secretly gritted his teeth. It could be said that he had suffered a setback today. In front of all his brothers, he was actually threatened by a woman. Prince Zhongshan was indeed a fierce man. Even his daughter-in-law was an unusual one. The lieutenant turned around and called one of his trusted subordinates over. Immediately go into the underground palace and report this matter to your majesty. Tell him that Prince Zhongshuan's consort sent this message. For the sake of your majesty's safety, we didn't listen to his orders. Yes. The young soldier nodded, turned around, and ran into the mountains. Qin Yining watched the soldier run away. She rubbed her hands that were hidden in her sleeves to wipe off the sweat on her hands. Qin Huaiyuan originally wanted to stand up for his daughter. He didn't expect that in the face of danger, his daughter wouldn't give him a chance to perform. She grasped the lieutenant's mentality and used her valiant aura to force the lieutenant to relent. Qin Huaiyuan felt gratified. He smiled and called Qin Yining to rest. Sit down and rest for a while. You must be tired. Qin Yining nodded. Ji Yun went to get a few crossbows and placed them under the shade of a tree. Unexpectedly, Qin Yining had just taken 2 steps when the ground suddenly trembled. The ground beneath her feet suddenly shook violently. Fortunately, Ji Yun and Qin Huaiyuan reacted quickly and supported her. She didn't fall. Oh no! Everyone turned around to look in the direction of Zong Mountain. They saw a small hill that wasn't very tall. At this moment, it was making rumbling sounds. The birds on the hill flew away. The statues and stone tablets that were built at the foot of the hill were on the verge of collapse due to the tremors. The Jingji guards surrounding Zong Mountain were all dumbstruck. The earth dragon turned over. Is it the earth dragon that turned over? It's your head. It's there. As soon as they finished speaking, they heard another boom sound. Qin Yining, who was at the foot of the mountain, saw a golden light flash behind the hillside. Immediately after, smoke and dust soared into the sky. It's the exploded. Heavens! So what the princess consort said was true. Is your majesty in the underground palace? If it's the underground palace, I'm afraid the odds are against him, right? Shut up. Do you want to die? The lieutenant and the Jingji guards were all shocked. They were already in a mess. Qin Yining stared blankly as Zong Mountain gradually calmed down. However, the birds on the mountain still circled in the sky and didn't disperse. A chill ran up from the soles of her feet and filled her entire body with coldness. Pang Xiao was still in the mountain. The exploded. Was Pang Xiao already? Sister Yi, calm down. Qin Huaiyuan held Qin Yining's shoulders and forced her to look at him. His large hand patted her arm. Listen to your father. The situation on the mountain is unknown. Pang Xiao might not be in trouble. The explosion just happened, so it's the best time to rescue him. You can't panic. You can't miss this opportunity. Qin Yining looked at Qin Huaiyuan in a panic. Her breathing was rapid and she couldn't say a word. Did you hear that? Calm down. Pang Zhishi is fine. Qin Huaiyuan raised his voice. Pang Zhishi is fine. Pang Zhishi is fine. Pang Zhishi is fine. Qin Yining's brain and ears were buzzing. She repeated this sentence many times in her heart before she could slowly see and hear clearly. Father. I'm fine. Her voice was hoarse and trembling. However, her eyes had already regained clarity. She turned around and said to the lieutenant, Why aren't you ordering someone to quickly return to the palace and report to the Empress Dowager so that she can send more people? The lieutenant and his group of people were also frightened. A few of them came back to their senses and already had their arms exposed. They rolled up their sleeves and planned to rush in to rescue Pang Zhishi. The lieutenant nodded his head repeatedly. When faced with Qin Yining, he thought about how he had tried to stop her just now. If he hadn't delayed for so long, perhaps everyone would have already heard the news and retreated. The lieutenant was ashamed and afraid. He called 2 of his subordinates and personally went to the palace to report the news. The imperial guards surrounding the imperial mausoleum quickly received instructions from their superior. At this moment, they didn't care about surrounding the imperial mausoleum anymore. Everyone rushed in to rescue Pang Zhishi. There were no more obstacles in front of them. Qin Yining took a deep breath and said, "Father, let's also bring some people to take a look." Qin Huayuan heard the commotion on the short mountain not far away. He shook his head and said, "Sister Yi, the mountain is chaotic. You shouldn't take the risk. Go back to the residence now. I'll bring Jinghu Wei in to take a look." "Father, don't try to persuade me. I know my own body. I won't rush in to rescue Pang Zhishi personally. I'll find a quiet place to watch. I just want to be closer so that I can know the situation immediately." Qin Yining's eyes were wide open. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they refused to fall. Qin Huayuan looked at Qin Yining for a long time. In the end, he sighed. He knew Qin Yining's temper. Even if she agreed to go back to the residence now, she would still have a way to come back if she wanted to once he brought his men into the mountain. It would be better to let her stay under his watch. It would be easier to protect her. "All right. Go take the pole and let them carry you up the mountain. But let's make it clear first. You're not allowed to participate in the rescue. You can only watch from the sidelines." "Okay." Qin Yining nodded. Jinghu Wei immediately had someone bring a bamboo pole. Qin Yining sat on a soft chair. Immediately, 2 strong Jinghu Wei lifted the bamboo pole one after the other. They effortlessly carried her up the mountain. Bing Tang and Ji Yun jogged on her left and right. The other Jinghu Wei ran even faster. Huzi's eyes were red. The group of people were like fierce tigers returning to the forest. They were about to rush forward. Qin Huayuan reminded everyone, don't be impulsive. You still need to listen to my instructions. Don't let others misunderstand that we're plotting a rebellion. We don't want Wang Yi to misunderstand." Huzi calmed down a little. He held his saber tightly and ordered his brothers to line up neatly. They followed Qin Huayuan. Chongshan Imperial Mausoleum was located on a small hill with sparse trees. It was a good place with good feng shui. The mountain behind it had the momentum of a crouching dragon coiling around it. It was considered Ji Xiang. The entrance to the Imperial Mausoleum at the foot of the mountain was neatly paved with bricks. There were stone statues of elephants, deer, and horses on both sides. There were also stone tablets carved with inscriptions. The atmosphere was very solemn. However, at this time, there were many cracks on the stone floor. It was uneven, like the cracks on the ground after a long drought. Some of the stone tablets and statues had fallen. Some were broken in the middle. Only half of the stone tablet was left. Its sharp end pointed to the sky, as if it was questioning why such a tragedy happened. The soldiers of the 5 army barracks, who were in charge of excavating and searching for treasures, were already in a panic. As they went up the mountain, they would occasionally see injured people helping each other down the mountain. There were also soldiers bearing the pain of carrying dusty officials. No one knew whether they were dead or alive. Wang Su, the commander of the 5 army barracks Imperial Guards, had his arm injured by a fallen tree. He couldn't move one of his shoulders. He stood not far away and shouted to his subordinates to not panic and try to save as many people as possible. Chapter 600. Qin Huayuan said in a deep voice, "I'm from Prince Zhongshuan's mansion. I'm Qin Meng, the former Minister of Rights. How's the situation in the mountain now?" Hearing that he was from the prince's mansion and that Qin Huayuan was a famous and capable official, although he was no longer in the imperial court, his reputation was still there. Wang Su breathed a sigh of relief. Just now, Your Majesty was leading the officials into the underground palace to investigate. They said that they found traces of treasure in the underground palace. Who would have thought that there would be a loud noise as soon as they entered? Our people guarding outside wanted to go in, but just as they reached the entrance of the underground palace, there was another loud noise. Flames spurted out from the entrance of the cave. Many of our brothers were burned and injured by the flames. After the flames were extinguished, the entrance was blocked. So, Your Majesty is now in the underground palace. Yes. Wang Su said anxiously. At that time, Your Majesty was accompanied by Prince Zhongshuan, Prince Consort Ji, and several officials and nobles. Because the passageway in the underground palace was narrow, their team was stretched out. Therefore, I speculated that they must have been separated after the explosion. The collapsed stones everywhere must have separated them. Wang Su scratched his head. He was so worried that the blue veins on his forehead popped out. Why did he have to encounter such a thing when he was on an errand? The brothers of the Imperial Guards of the 5 barracks had been digging in the underground palace for so many days, but they didn't encounter any explosions or collapses. However, Your Majesty came in person with the officials, and then something happened. If something happened to Your Majesty, they wouldn't even be qualified to be buried with him. Cutting a knife by 1,000 cuts was a waste of energy. Wouldn't it be better to burn them alive to vent his hatred? Wang Su shuddered and hurriedly shouted to his subordinates, "Quickly, save people first. Dig out the entrance of the cave and save people." At this time, there was no need to wait for the Empress Dowager's orders. As long as the soldiers were outside the mountain, they were all mobilized to dig at the entrance of the underground palace. Qin Yining was carried by 2 Jinghu Wei to the entrance of the underground palace halfway up the mountain and placed under a large tree. The Jinghu Wei then followed Qin Huayuan and Huzi to help the people from the Imperial Guards Institute move the stones. Qin Yining was served by Bing Tang and Ji Yun. She sat on the soft chair and stared blankly at the scene in front of her. She listened to the clamorous shouts and cries for help, and her head felt as if it was being hammered. Whenever someone crawled out of the hole, Qin Yining couldn't help but stand up to see if that person was Pang Shao or someone he knew. Repeating this over and over again, he didn't feel tired at all. Because she was pregnant now, she couldn't help at all. She could only sit here and wait anxiously. It seemed that she couldn't do anything except wait anxiously. Time passed by bit. As more and more officials were rescued, Qin Yining's face became paler and paler. Because Pang Shao wasn't among those people. And according to their description, the situation in the underground palace was really not optimistic. The interior is divided into many tomb chambers. We are at the back of the team, so we are closer to the entrance of the underground palace. Your Majesty and Prince Zhongshuan are at the front, and they have long disappeared. Is anyone familiar with the structure of the tomb chambers? Should the people from the Imperial Guards Institute know? Wang Su was immediately called forward. He discussed with Qin Huayuan and took out a paper and pen to draw a map of the underground palace. Qin Yining wanted to go over and take a look, but there were too many people there. Everyone was anxious to save people and anxiously looked at the map. She couldn't do anything, and it was inconvenient to squeeze with people. Even if she looked at the map, she wouldn't be able to use it, so she had to sit back. In the blink of an eye, it was afternoon. The sun was going to the west, and most of the rescued officials had been sent back to the city. There weren't many people around the Empress Dowager that she could trust. This time, Li Qitian brought all the high-ranking members of the clan to Mount Mang. Some of the clan members were seriously injured after being rescued from the underground palace, and some were scared out of their wits. They were afraid that there would be more accidents on the mountain, so they all found excuses to leave first. They didn't have the slightest intention to stay to help. The Empress Dowager had no choice but to arrange for Li Weiliang, the head eunuch of Ci and palace, to take charge. Li Weiliang was 30 years old. He was tall and handsome, but his eyes were a little arrogant. He wasn't very easy to talk to. He could serve the Empress Dowager thoughtfully, but in front of outsiders, he was the head of the high and mighty Ci and palace. In the past, he had worked with Li Guanwen, but his status was always lower than Li Guanwen's. He was unconvinced. Later on, he followed the Empress Dowager's palace, but his status was still lower than Li Guanwen's. Now that such a big matter was arranged for him to take charge, it was inevitable that he would feel a little arrogant. Li Weiliang led a group of eunuchs to take charge of the scene. The rescued officials should go back to their residences first. Even if they miss your majesty, it's not good for them to stay here, is it? It's better to leave this matter to the Jingji Guard and the Jingji Guard office. Sir, if there's nothing else, I'll ask someone to send you back to your residences immediately. Sir. You are. Li Weiliang walked up to Qin Huayuan and raised his eyebrows. Qin Huayuan cupped his hands and said, "This humble one is Qin Mang." Oh. So it's the former Minister of Rights, Lord Qin. Why are you here? You've already retired and should be enjoying the rest of your life at home. Qin Huayuan smiled slightly. Don't tell me that eunuch doesn't know that Prince Xiongxuan is this old man's worthy son-in-law. What's more, your majesty is still in the underground palace right now. This old man brought the soldiers of the prince's estate to help in order to save her as soon as possible. Ha! Li Weiliang sneered coldly. Then he put on a fake smile and said, "Who knows? After this incident, we don't dare to trust anyone easily. What's more, you're no longer an official. Wouldn't it be better for the soldiers of Prince Xiongxuan's estate to be managed by the prince's estate's head envoy?" Qin Yining listened to Li Weiliang's words, which were becoming more and more outrageous. Judging from Li Weiliang's attitude, he knew what the Empress Dowager thought of them. He stood up and said, "Eunuch Li, please don't waste your breath here. If you have the time, it's better to go save people." Li Weiliang glared at Qin Yining and said with a cold smile, "You aren't Prince Xiongxuan's imperial consort, are you? I heard that you guessed that there was a bomb buried in the underground palace and tried to lead people into the imperial mausoleum." Qin Yining could hear the distortion and provocation in Li Weiliang's words. He was unmoved and said, "If you had listened to me and reported to your majesty earlier, and had let your majesty leave the underground palace earlier, this wouldn't have happened." Li Weiliang raised his hands in a salute and said with a cold smile, "The Empress Dowager was just wondering why Wang Fei knew about the bomb buried in the underground palace. Originally, I wanted to go to the prince's estate to ask for an explanation. Now that I've encountered it, I ask Wang Fei to resolve my confusion." Qin Yining's brow furrowed. "I was present on the day of the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet and heard the words your majesty ordered people to say. I've thought long and hard to think of it now. It's a pity that I was a step too late." "Oh. Was it really an accident that you were a step too late, or was it on purpose?" Li Weiliang looked at Qin Yining and said in a strange tone, "This question, if the Empress Dowager was present, she would definitely ask you. You are a woman and it's inconvenient for your body. Don't stay here. Go back to the Fu and wait for news. When the Empress Dowager is free, she might summon you into the palace to ask for an explanation." Qin Yining looked at Li Weiliang with a cold and stern expression. Chapter 601. She didn't have the ability to dig up the Imperial Mausoleum's underground palace immediately. She didn't have the ability to deliver the news in advance. She couldn't even do anything to help. She could only sit there and watch helplessly. Even now, a eunuch still dared to bully her. Qin Yining gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "It seems that Eunuch Li's rules aren't very good. Ji Yun." Ji Yun had already endured for a long time. When she heard this, she immediately responded and went forward to slap Li Weiliang's face. A crisp paw sound was heard. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they stopped digging and moving rocks and soil. Li Weiliang covered his face and stared at Qin Yining in disbelief. "You, how dare you order people, eunuch Li, as the Empress Dowager's personal servant, you should know the rules the best and know your limits. Why are you acting so unbearably? The Empress Dowager is worried about your majesty and the officials' safety, so she ordered you to come here to save them. Instead of helping, you actually have the leisure to flaunt your authority here. No matter how bad this king's consort is, she's still a first-rank noble lady. Is she worthy of being lectured by you? You, Prince Zhongshuan's consort, are really imposing. When I return to the palace, I will definitely report this to the Empress Dowager. If you don't go, this king's consort will still go. When the Empress Dowager is most anxious about your majesty's safety, not only did you not save him, you even have the mind to talk about these useless things. I must report this to the Empress Dowager and see how she will deal with you." Li Weiliang was a little scared. He originally wanted to flatter the Empress Dowager and act according to her wishes. He only spoke sarcastically when he saw Qin Yining. He didn't expect this woman to be so fierce even though she was pregnant. She actually dragged him into the mud. Li Weiliang pursed his lips. If he shut up now, this matter would naturally be over, but his face would also be lost. If he continued to make a fuss, he was afraid that the Qin clan would order people to be rough with him. Qin Yining coldly looked at Li Weiliang's expression. He saw that his expression seemed to be wavering, but it wasn't for your majesty's safety in the underground palace, but for himself. He couldn't help but feel a little tired. Just as Qin Yining was silently cursing, a burst of cheers suddenly came from the entrance of the underground palace. There were also the sounds of soldiers shouting. A large rock was moved away, revealing a narrow cave entrance. Everyone worked together and dug out a hole big enough for one person to pass through. After exchanging a few words with the person inside, they suddenly let out a cheer. Qin Yining was stunned and immediately walked over there. Who would have thought that when he got closer, he would see two familiar faces among the few people who crawled out of the cave? However, he didn't see Pang Zhao's figure. Ji Ziyu casually patted the dust on his head. When he saw Qin Yining approaching, he only nodded. Lu Heng took a big gulp of water from the water bag handed to him by a soldier. Just as he spat out the mouthwash, he saw Qin Yining and was immediately stunned. Qin Yining said, "It's great that you're all okay." Ji Ziyu silently took a wet cloth from a Jingji guard and wiped his face. Lu Heng was a little excited. He knew that Qin Yining came for Pang Zhao, but he was still excited. When he saw Qin Yining at this moment, he only felt joy in his heart. "It's too dangerous here. It's not suitable for you to come." In Qin Yining's mind, she and Lu Heng had gone through thick and thin together. Although they didn't have the chance to meet after Lu Heng was made a count, it was true that they trusted each other. Qin Yining asked, "What's the situation inside? Did you see your majesty and Wang Yi?" Even though Qin Yining put your majesty in front of his question, Lu Heng could still tell that Qin Yining only wanted to ask about Pang Zhao. The eagerness in his eyes gradually faded. Lu Heng hid his disappointment very well. At that time, your majesty was holding Wang Ye's hand and walking at the front. The two of them were whispering, so we naturally couldn't get close. The closest person to your majesty was Chief Steward Li. The explosion suddenly happened. I first saw a burst of fire, then the mountain collapsed and the ground cracked. I didn't have time to react before I fell to the ground. Thanks to Prince Consort Ji's help, I was able to avoid a falling rock. When I looked up again, your majesty and Wang Yi were already gone. The entrance they walked through was already filled with falling rocks, and I could faintly see the fire inside. Qin Yining's face turned pale. There was an explosion, a fire, and falling rocks. Was there any way to save her? Even if she didn't get burned, injured, or smashed, what if the air inside was thin? Qin Yining was full of worry. He didn't think in a positive direction. His expression became uglier and uglier. Lu Heng actually didn't know what he was thinking. What he said was true, but he didn't want to tell Qin Yining because he didn't want her to be too sad and anxious. However, when he saw how worried Qin Yining was about Pang Xiao, he couldn't help but tell her. It was as if that would make him feel better. However, when he saw how worried and scared Qin Yining was, other than feeling bitter, he felt even more distressed and regretful. I shouldn't have told you this. Qin Yining shook his head and said, "It's okay. You were right to tell me the truth. It's easier to rescue them if we know where they are." Qin Huaiyuan also comforted her, "Sister Yi, don't worry. If we know where to go, we know how to save them." He took out the sketch of the underground palace's interior and asked Lu Heng, "Does Zhong Yiban know which direction your majesty went?" Lu Heng pointed in a direction on the map. "It's about here. Do you want to dig through here first?" Ji Ziyu threw the cloth away and looked at the map closer, saying, "There are many natural stone walls in the underground palace. I'm afraid that I'll dig in the wrong place and do nothing. I'm also afraid that there will be other passages inside, so they didn't go in this direction." Li Weiliang saw that they were discussing and completely excluded him. He covered his face and came forward. "Why don't we ask the Empress Dowager's opinion first before making a decision?" Lu Heng frowned and didn't express his opinion. Qin Yining was furious and wanted to continue lecturing him, but Ji Ziyu beat him to it. Only to hear Ji Ziyu's deep and cold voice say, "And who are you?" Li Weiliang was so angry that he fell backwards. However, the person in front of him was the Empress Dowager's son-in-law. The Empress Dowager doted on Princess Royal the most. He could only smile and bow. "Greetings, Prince Consort Ji. I'm Li Weiliang, the eunuch in charge of the Empress Dowager's palace. Since you're an eunuch, go to the inner palace. You shouldn't be here." After saying this, Ji Ziyu picked up the map again and discussed with Qin Huaiyuan, Lu Heng, and Qin Yining. Li Weiliang's face flushed red. He realized that many people around him were looking at him, which made him even more embarrassed. "Prince Consort Ji, the Empress Dowager ordered me to preside over this event." "You can't, guards. This subordinate is here. Send this eunuch back." "Yes." Ji Ziyu ordered. Two of his trusted subordinates immediately came forward to cover the eunuch's mouth and carried him away. Their swift and decisive manner surprised Qin Yining. Chapter 602. Qin Yining didn't expect Ji Ziyu to take the initiative to comfort her. She couldn't help but nod gratefully. She had always felt that Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu were in a relationship where they used each other and kept each other in check. Now, it seemed that her subjective understanding had been wrong. Although Ji Ziyu didn't say much, Qin Yining could feel his sincerity and kindness. When Ji Ziyu faced Qin Huaiyuan, he was polite and respectful. He wasn't as cold as he used to be. This made Qin Yining reconsider whether her understanding of Ji Ziyu was preconceived. When Ji Ziyu intercepted and killed the Dian envoy, she was forced to hide in the mountains. Because of that incident, Qin Yining remembered Ji Ziyu's actions and didn't have a good impression of him. Now, it seemed that the relationship between Ji Ziyu and Pang Xiao wasn't what she thought it was. Ji Ziyu and Qin Huaiyuan discussed countermeasures in low voices. "We have to continue digging at the entrance, but we can't ignore the position inside. I'm afraid that if we rashly dig deeper into the underground palace, it will cause a second collapse. Won't your majesty be in danger then? We can find someone who knows geology to do a survey first to avoid making mistakes. When Qin Yining heard this, she couldn't help but say, the Tomb Raider should be the best at this, right? When Ji Ziyu and Qin Huayuan heard this, they suddenly looked at Qin Yining. Their eyes lit up and they were pleasantly surprised. Sister Yi is right. The Tomb Raider is indeed capable. When Lu Heng heard this, he couldn't help but panic. He couldn't help but refute, time is tight. Where can we find someone we can trust? What if your majesty and Wang Yi are injured in the underground palace? What if this person takes advantage of the situation and sneaks in? When he said this, Qin Yining naturally imagined Pang Xiao lying in a pool of blood, severely injured, and the people they arranged to infiltrate the underground palace were bribed by Li Qitian to only save your majesty. They didn't care about Pang Xiao or directly attacked Pang Xiao. After they came out, they could say, I didn't see Wang Yi, and send them away. When he thought of that scenario, Qin Yining's expression turned ugly. Uncle Lu is right. This is indeed not safe. Ji Ziyu raised his eyebrows and glanced at Lu Heng. He said calmly, this isn't difficult. Let's find someone who knows geology first and survey the location. As for the Tomb Raider, we might not be able to find him in a short time. We'll talk about it after we find him. Let's find someone we can trust first. If there's really a way to open the entrance, we don't need the Tomb Raider. I'll go in. After he finished speaking, he handed the map to Qin Huayuan and swiftly left to make arrangements. Qin Yining's lips moved, but he didn't say anything in the end. At this critical moment, he was willing to believe in his own judgment. He believed that Ji Ziyu didn't have any ill intentions towards Pang Xiao. When Lu Heng saw that Qin Yining was very weak, he advised, Prince Consort Ji is here. You should go back. It won't be good if you hurt your body. Qin Yining smiled at Lu Heng. Even if I go back, I'll be worried about this place. I won't be able to rest well either. I don't need to do anything here. I'll just sit on the side. Lu Heng frowned and followed Qin Yining to the soft seat on the side. Bing Tang and Ji Yun were somewhat guarded against Lu Heng. They supported Qin Yining on both sides, so Lu Heng didn't have a chance to get close to her. Lu Heng's heart couldn't help but feel sour and angry. Even at this time, Qin Yining still refused to let go of Pang Xiao. She was waiting here now. She didn't care about her own health or what other people thought of her. She only wanted to get news of Pang Xiao as soon as possible, regardless of whether Pang Xiao was alive or dead. She kept looking in the direction of the cave entrance. As long as there was the slightest movement, she would stretch her neck to see if Pang Xiao had been rescued. Lu Heng's jealousy towards Pang Xiao was like boiling magma in his heart. It was about to burn him to ashes. Pang Xiao, that boorish man, how could he have such a beautiful woman? He had clearly sacrificed as much as Pang Xiao. During Qin Yining's most dangerous and difficult time, Pang Xiao wasn't by her side to protect her at all. He was the one who accompanied her through fire and water in the desert. Why couldn't Qin Yining see him? Lu Heng stood beside Qin Yining expressionlessly. He was in a sorry state and his face was dirty. He looked like a stone sculpture. His fists were clenched in his sleeves, and his eyes were frighteningly dark. Bing Tang and Ji Yun, who were not familiar with Lu Heng, were even more guarded against Lu Heng. Their Wang Fei could not withstand any provocation right now, and could not be touched at all. If Lu Heng made any move that was detrimental to Qin Yining, they would not care about Lu Heng's status. Bing Tang had not carried the anesthetic powder for nothing. The mountain was noisy. There were the cries of the injured, and the family members of the officials and soldiers who had rushed over in the chaos. They cried when they saw their family members either injured or dead. There were also the shouts of the soldiers as they moved rocks in an orderly manner under Jizu's command and used shovels and scabbards to dig the earth. But looking at the noise, Qin Yining's heart was unprecedentedly calm. She kept telling herself that Pang Xiao would be fine. With Pang Xiao's abilities, his bravery on the battlefield, his reputation was enough to stop children from crying at night. How many dangerous situations had he not encountered? In the end, hadn't he turned the danger into safety? In Tian Jizi's prophecy, Pang Xiao was the living Ziwei Emperor star. If he really was the Ziwei Emperor star, how could he have lost his life in the collapse? He had not conquered the world, he had not unified the country. He would not be defeated like this. But as time went by, the sky darkened. Torches and lanterns were lit on the mountain, and the night wind gradually became cold. With the dim light, Qin Yining could no longer see the entrance of the imperial mausoleum clearly. She also couldn't tell how many people had left in front of her and how many groups of soldiers had changed. Gradually, she began to feel uncertain. Tian Jizi's prophecy was extremely mysterious. She respected metaphysics, but now she couldn't help but be suspicious. No matter how strong Pang Xiao was, he was still made of flesh and blood. In the explosion and collapse of the underground palace, would the fire and falling rocks avoid him because he had Tian Jizi's prophecy? If Pang Xiao was injured and Li Qitian was still alive and healthy, Li Qitian would probably deal with them, right? How could she protect her family and the Wang Fu at that time? What if Pang Xiao was gone? Qin Yining shivered. She felt the lively movements of the two children in her belly. Her mind suddenly became clear. She could not allow herself to be weak anymore. She was going to be a mother. If she panicked, how could she protect her children? Because she was Pang Xiao's wife, no matter if he was injured or not, she should bear all his burdens and take all the responsibility for him. Qin Yining now deeply felt the pressure of Pang Xiao's position. He was a flag, a mountain. Behind him stood his family, friends, loyal subordinates, and trusted friends. He could not fall. No matter what danger there was, he had to be as steady as a flag. Because once he fell, the people behind him would be the ones to bear the brunt of the storm. Qin Yining had been protected by Pang Xiao before, so maybe she did not understand it deeply. It was not until this moment that she understood what it meant to grit your teeth and endure, and what it meant to not fall no matter what. Bing Tang, Ji Yun, accompany me to rest in the carriage. Bing Tang and Ji Yun were overjoyed. They were worried about how to persuade Qin Yining, but Qin Yining spoke first. Wang Fei, the carriage has just arrived. I have already asked them to drive the carriage to the nearest flat ground. I have also prepared hot water and dry food. I know. Qin Yining smiled and said to Ji Yun, you were just standing beside me, winking and walking around. How could I not know? Seeing that Qin Yining actually smiled, Bing Tang and Ji Yun both sighed in relief. Bing Tang said, it's not early. We servants will serve you to eat first, then take some medicine to prevent miscarriage and rest. Don't worry, I just told Huzi to send someone to inform us if anything happens. Old Master also arranged for 2 brothers to protect the carriage. You just have to take care of yourself. Qin Yining nodded and followed Bing Tang and Ji Yun to rest. Seeing her walk away, Lu Heng, who was helping Qin Huayuan move the stones, looked away. All of Qin Yining's emotions did not escape the eyes of Lu Heng, who had been paying attention to her. Seeing her confused eyes for Pang Xiao, without any fighting spirit and sitting there helplessly, his heart ached and he was jealous. But seeing that she seemed to have thought something through and her gaze became especially firm, just like the gaze in her eyes when they experienced so many hardships in Tayton, his heart ached and he was jealous. Her weakness and her strength were all for Pang Xiao. It had nothing to do with him. Although they were good friends who went through thick and thin together, it was inconvenient for them to contact each other often because of the difference between men and women. It could be said that one day, even if he remarried and had a child, she would not care. Even if he never appeared in her life again, she would not care. Lu Heng's eyes were filled with disappointment and resentment. When he turned around, he met Qin Huayuan's gentle eyes. Lu Heng's heart skipped a beat. He used all of his self-control to control his emotions and not let himself lose his composure. Instead, he said with concern, "Lord Qin, it's getting late. You should go and rest. There are so many people here." Qin Huayuan smiled slightly and said, "This old man is fine. Lu Boy, on the other hand, is bruised and has been trapped in the underground palace for a while. This old man sees that your complexion is not good. Why don't this old man go and rest first?" Lu Heng's heart couldn't help but beat wildly. He couldn't help but look away, not daring to meet Qin Huayuan's eyes. But when he realized what he had done, he immediately looked up and said, "Thank you, Lord Qin, for your concern. You flatter me. This old man is already a virgin. I can't afford to be called Lord by this old man. Then this one will go against the rules and call you uncle. This one has a good relationship with Prince Zhongshuan. You are Wang Ye's father-in-law. It is only right that I call you uncle." Chapter 603. Lu Heng's face turned from red to pale. Under Qin Huayuan's penetrating gaze, Lu Heng's thoughts, which he thought were deeply hidden, were all exposed. Both of them were smart people, and their senses were very sharp. However, Lu Heng had never come into contact with Qin Huayuan before. Now that he was reminded by Qin Huayuan's words, he felt as if all of his hidden thoughts had been exposed under the sun. Those dark thoughts that could not be exposed to the light of day crackled as they were burned, causing his face to heat up. Was he not as good as Pang Xiao? Was he less interested in Qin Yining than Pang Xiao? Or was it that Qin Huayuan was still satisfied with Pang Xiao bringing Qin Yining such a miserable life? Lu Heng's lips moved. For a moment, he didn't know how to address Qin Huayuan. The words he wanted to refute were choked in his throat, neither moving up nor down. Qin Huayuan sighed softly. He could understand his daughter's thoughts, but he couldn't watch things develop in a bad direction. There were indeed a lot of troubles around Pang Xiao. However, Pang Xiao was also devoted to Qin Yining. People couldn't be too greedy. He only had one daughter, so naturally, he could only marry one person. Qin Yining's thoughts were also on Pang Xiao. If he didn't give a little advice, the young man in front of him might go into a dead end and do something they didn't want to see. However, Qin Huayuan also knew that matters of the heart were unreasonable. If a few words could persuade a person, there wouldn't be so many infatuated men and women in the world. Qin Huayuan nodded slightly at Lu Heng and told him that he could rest. Then, he turned around and left with the map to look for Jiziyu. Lu Heng stood there in a daze. No one could understand the impetuosity and bitterness in his heart. Looking in the direction where Qin Yining was resting, he took 2 heavy steps and finally stopped. He couldn't be impulsive. Qin Yining was pregnant with twins. What if he hurt his body by acting rashly? He liked her, and he wanted to have her all to himself. This thought grew stronger and stronger after he received the title of nobility and Your Majesty's important position. But he would rather kill everyone than hurt her. Forget it. Let's wait for a while. There's no rush. Lu Heng stood there in a daze for a long time before he went to look for Zhang Sui and rested on the bed that was temporarily arranged for him. Ji Ziyu and Qin Huayuan had already reached the other side of the hill where the imperial mausoleum was located. Ji Ziyu's expression was cold. He held the map and pursed his lips, waiting for someone to explore the ground. He saw Qin Huayuan walking over. Ji Ziyu calmed himself down and cupped his hands politely. Uncle Qin. In the face of Ji Ziyu's greeting, Qin Huayuan gladly nodded his head and said with a smile, Prince Consort Ji has worked hard. Just now, the soldiers came to deliver dinner. I saw that Prince Consort Ji didn't eat much. Now that the situation is chaotic, only Prince Consort Ji can control the situation. You must take care of yourself. Ji Ziyu smiled. His bright and beautiful eyes were cold under the moonlight, but the smile lines at the corners of his lips and the flash of dimples made his handsome face look bright and gentle. Uncle Qin, don't worry. I've been fighting at the border for many years. I can endure any kind of pain. A meal won't get in the way. Besides, Your Majesty and Jishi are trapped down there. I can't eat anything. Qin Huayuan nodded his head and sighed. This time, the important ministers, nobles, and aristocratic families of the imperial court have all suffered here. The lightest injury is only a minor injury. Your Majesty is still in the underground palace. I hope that Eugene Khan won't take this opportunity to launch a large-scale attack. Otherwise, we'll be even more passive. Ji Ziyu knew that Qin Huayuan was reminding him, so he smiled. Uncle Qin is right. However, the Tiger Army that I'm in charge of is all around the capital, so I can't do anything for now. Qin Huai was a smart person. He knew that even though Ji Ziyu had trusted aides in the Dragon Stallion army, he wouldn't extend his hand to the border unless it was absolutely necessary. He didn't want to give others something to use against him. It seemed like Ji Ziyu and Pang Shao were similar people. It was no wonder that they could become best friends. The two of them did not talk about anything else, only focusing on how to open the underground palace to save people. At this moment, the capital had fallen into an unprecedented panic. The imperial tomb of Chongshan was not far from the capital, and it only took 3.5 hours. The explosion in the imperial tomb of Chongshan caused the ground to shake. Although the capital did not feel the tremors, the people living in the suburbs all heard the huge explosion. Just as the commoners were at a loss, injured officials were sent home one after another from the direction of Chongshan. There were also some family members of officials who heard that something had happened at Chongshan. They cried and shouted as they drove out of the city to look for people at Chongshan. Even if everyone ordered their servants to keep their mouths shut, they couldn't stop everyone from having their closest friends and relatives. This kind of "I'll only tell you, don't tell anyone else" matter quickly spread throughout the capital. Who knows if it was done on purpose, but even in the restaurants and tea houses, there were people talking about the collapse of the Chongshan imperial tomb. After the curfew, the Warden's Division and Shuntian House arranged for twice as many people to patrol the city. The people heard many different versions of the rumors, and seeing how nervous the soldiers were, they could not help but feel nervous too. Every family locked their doors and windows, not caring about the heat. Those merchants hated that they couldn't get a few more boards. Even those fireworks in Rouge streets, more than half of them had closed their doors and stopped doing business. First, they searched the city, then the imperial tomb collapsed. It was said that Your Majesty, the prince, and some high-ranking officials were buried alive. The people felt that the sky was about to fall. This tense atmosphere quickly spread to the prince's mansion. Early the next morning, Ma Shi and Yao Qinggu were eating breakfast when the Yao clan rushed in a panic. Mother! It seems that something happened to Dai Fu. Ma Shi put down her spoon. Where did you hear this rumor? It's not a rumor. Now this matter has blown up. I'm afraid that everyone in the city knows. It's said that Your Majesty took people to the imperial tomb of Chongshan. I don't know what happened, but the imperial tomb of the dog emperor of the previous dynasty was ignited. The imperial tomb collapsed, and many people were buried alive. Yao Qinggu put down the rice cake. He could not swallow it no matter what. He said worriedly, so, yesterday, when the in-laws went out with the Qin clan, it's very likely that they knew about this matter. That's most likely the case. Yao clan said angrily, what do they mean? They knew that something might have happened to Dai Fu, but they refused to tell us. What kind of intentions do they have? Ma Shi slammed the table and said angrily, tell you. Tell you whether you can save people, dig up the mountain, or quell the rumors in the city. The Yao clan had been beaten by Ma Shi too many times, and now there was a shadow in their hearts. When they saw Ma Shi lose her temper, they were already afraid. However, the rumors were too scary. The Yao clan did not care so much at this moment. They sat down next to Ma Shi and said in a low voice, if nothing happened, why didn't Dai Fu and Dai Fu's wife come home yesterday? Dai Fu's wife is pregnant and usually can't go to the toilet. She has to be carried on someone's back. He's so delicate, how could he suddenly go out in a carriage? I think they must have gone to Mount Chongshan. It's very likely that something happened to Dai Fu. Ma Shi was not used to hearing the Yao clan speak like this. She glared at her fiercely and said, you're also a mother-in-law. Pay attention to your words. Otherwise, the servants will think that you're vulgar. No matter what the rumors are outside, we can't mess up in our residence. I'll ask people to close the gates for the next few days. Don't go out, and also tell the servants not to go out. So, you already knew? Yao Qinggu asked with a frown. Ma Shi nodded and said, yesterday, when Yi went out, she told me. But at that time, she was just guessing. She was in a hurry to save people. Ma Shi told her what Qin Yining had told her, and then said, in the beginning, you said that you wanted to bring people to Mount Chongshan. Unfortunately, you're a commoner now, and the soldiers surrounding Mount Chongshan might not let you go. Yi is the princess consort, and your majesty has personally conferred her the title of a superior first-rank noble lady. In order to pass the news inside, Sister Yi had no choice but to go out. Glaring at Yao Shi, she continued, you are also a mother. Her daughter is doing all of this for the sake of saving our family's fortune. In any case, you should have some virtue in your words and accumulate some virtue for yourself. The Yao clan's depression from being reprimanded was no match for her panic. She was not afraid when she heard the rumors earlier because she knew that the rumors were not credible. Who was your majesty? How could the emperor be so stupid as to bring all the officials into the underground palace of the previous dynasty's imperial mausoleum and be buried in the underground palace? Wouldn't that save them a funeral? Your majesty was not stupid. At first, the Yao clan just thought that the rumors were nonsense. Although they were a little anxious, they did not take them all seriously. However, after hearing Ma Shi's words, they confirmed that Pang Xiao might really be buried in the underground palace. Otherwise, there would be no news from the mountain until now. The Yao clan was completely flustered. Father, mother, what should we do? Quickly think of a way. What else can we do? We can't help. The only thing we can do now is to help the children look after the home. Ma Shi looked at Yao Qinggu and said, Old man, what do you think? Yao Qinggu and Ma Shi had been separated for such a long time. Although he was angry at Ma Shi's temper, he was also happy that Ma Shi softened and discussed with him. After all, they were an old couple who had been together for a lifetime. The warmth in Yao Qinggu's letter dispelled some of his anxiety. He took some tobacco and added it to the brass pipe. His old hand pressed the tobacco firmly. After a while, he said, You're right. We can't panic at this time. Look after the home and sort out the gold and silver in advance. If something happens and we have to leave at the last minute, we won't be in a hurry. Next, arrange for someone to go to Zongshan and listen to what happened. Wasn't it because of the Qin clan that her mother and son began to distance themselves from her? Why was Dai Fu the one who was most likely to be involved in the collapse of Mount Chongshan? Why didn't they just bury the Qin clan? The excavation on the mountain was beginning to bear fruit. The entrances to the underground palace were all open, and they could already see the first tomb chamber. Several ministers were rescued from inside. Some of them were injured or burned, while others were dead. Those who came out alive were arranged to be sent to the hospital. The corpses that were smashed or burned beyond recognition were carried to the side. The identity of the corpses could be determined from their official robes and the token hanging from their waists. It would be easier to inform their families to identify the corpses and bury them. Qin Yining had a bowl of porridge and a pregnancy-stabilizing pill in the morning. He sat under a tree far away and watched the excavation site expressionlessly. Those people weren't wearing the dark purple robes that Pang Xiao wore when he went out. Their stature was also different from Pang Zhao's. They weren't Pang Zhao's. However, Qin Yining couldn't relax at all. The first tomb chamber was already like this. According to Ji Ziyu and Lu Heng, Pang Xiao and Li Qitian went inside after the explosion. What was the situation inside? Seeing her sitting on the side with a solemn expression, Qin Huaiyuan was worried that her depression would harm her health. He persuaded her, "Sister Yi, listen to father's advice. This place is chaotic and dirty, and many people have died unjustly. It's really inauspicious. In order to avoid harming the child in your belly, it's better to avoid it. Father will ask someone to send you home, okay?" Qin Yining was stunned for a long time before she realized that her father was talking to her. She absent-mindedly raised her head and met Qin Huaiyuan's bloodshot eyes, which were filled with concern. She shook her head and said, "Father, you don't have to worry. Your daughter has seen big scenes before. These things won't make me afraid. I also had a good rest last night. Bing Tang was watching over me, so I'm fine. Father, on the other hand, you've been busy all night without rest." Qin Huaiyuan wasn't in his 20s like Ji Ziyu. Even if he was in his 40s, he was still a civil official. His physical strength couldn't be compared to a young military general. No one could stand it after staying up all night to command and excavate here. Qin Huaiyuan sighed. His outer robe was already dirty and messy. He carelessly sat down next to Qin Yining, who had grabbed a little girl for him. "Father knows that you're anxious, but you have to take care of yourself. You're not alone now. Your life doesn't count. There are 2 more in your belly." "Yes. Father, I know. If something happens to Wang Yi, I know that the child in my belly is the continuation of the Pang family's bloodline. I won't be impulsive and lose sight of the other. I will do what I can. If I feel uncomfortable, I'll go back. Perhaps I'll be able to find him today." Qin Huaiyuan carefully examined Qin Yining's expression. He saw that her eyes were clear and there wasn't a trace of panic or cowardice. Instead, they were shockingly calm. He knew that she had a plan in her heart. Qin Huaiyuan looked inquiringly at Bing Tang. Bing Tang received Qin Huaiyuan's gaze and said knowingly, "Old master, don't worry. Wang Fei has been well nourished these days. Her foundation has been replenished and the fetus is stable. There is no problem now. If the situation is not right, Wang Fei doesn't need to say anything. This servant will have Jinghu Wei's brothers kidnap Wang Fei and take her back to the Wang Fu to lie in bed." Bing Tang purposely spoke in a light tone. As expected, Qin Huaiyuan and Qin Yining both smiled. The gloomy and anxious atmosphere was swept away and the atmosphere became lively. Qin Yining stayed where she was and quietly waited for the good news. At this time, the Empress Dowager finally made a move. She once again called in 1,000 imperial guards to reorganize the area around the imperial mausoleum and strictly seal it off. She also ordered Ci and Palace's eunuch, Li Weiliang, to come again with the Empress Dowager's imperial edict. He was responsible for coordinating with the 5 Army Barracks Imperial Guards Commander Wang Su to monitor the rescue situation on the mountain. Li Weiliang had been sent directly back to the palace by Ji Ziyu's order. He had given a lot of face. Now that he was sent here again by imperial edict, he naturally held his head high and thought that he had to regain his face in front of everyone. Therefore, Li Weiliang led a group of mid-level officials and the Jingji guards that the Empress Dowager had personally arranged for. Along the way up the mountain, they saw the officials and noble families waiting for their families on the mountain. They all sent them down the mountain using the Empress Dowager's order as an excuse. The corpses that were found were also ordered to be carried down the mountain for identification. The scene was very clean. Even though this was a good thing, Qin Yining was still sitting here and was targeted by Li Weiliang. Last time, he had been humiliated by Ji Ziyu because of Qin Yining. How could Li Weiliang let go of the chance to take revenge this time? Therefore, Li Weiliang led everyone up the mountain and headed in the direction of Qin Yining. He said coldly, "I have come by the Empress Dowager's order to purge the mountain of irrelevant people. Wang Fei may have a high status, but sitting here is too much of a hindrance. I can understand your worry for Wang Yi, but you can't just sit here and rescue people. If the time to rescue your majesty is delayed, Wang Fei probably can't afford to be delayed." Qin Yining sat steadily in his original position. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Li Gonggong's words are too harsh. What are your intentions for putting such a big label on my head? If me sitting here can delay the soldiers of the Jingji guards from rescuing your majesty, then the 2,000 to 3,000 people that the Jingji guards have arranged can't beat a pregnant woman like me." By saying this, you are not just randomly accusing this king's imperial concubine of a crime, you are also looking down on the abilities of the Jingji guards. Li Weiliang's face and ears turned red. He angrily scolded, "Prince Xiongxuan, imperial concubine, you are too arrogant." "Oh, I understand. No wonder Wang Fei doesn't care about the Empress Dowager's edict. I've heard that Prince Xiongxuan is famous for his fighting prowess and is a pillar of the country. But for Wang Fei, a woman, he once defied the imperial decree 33 times. Does Wang Fei feel that because Wang Yi dared to defy the imperial decree for you, you also don't care about the Empress Dowager's edict?" The quarrel here had attracted the attention of the surrounding people. Someone immediately rushed to tell Qin Huayuan. Qin Yining stood up without fear. Bing Tang and Ji Yun immediately supported Qin Yining's left and right hands. The Jingji guards that were digging and moving couldn't help but stop what they were doing and look at Qin Yining and Li Weiliang. Qin Yining took 2 steps forward and stood in front of Li Weiliang. This king's imperial concubine has always been a scholar. She has seen many records in the history books of those who were loyal to the country and the people even though they were not eunuchs. I feel that even if they were mid-level officials, there would still be loyal people. However, the good reputation of these loyal eunuchs has been affected by a few people. In this king's imperial concubine's opinion, why do the people have different opinions about the eunuchs? It is all because of those traitorous eunuchs who sowed discord and gossiped for their own benefit. Your Majesty and Prince Xiongxuan are sworn brothers. It was originally a harmonious relationship between Prince Xiongxuan and Your Majesty has already investigated the matter and declared that Prince Xiongxuan was innocent. The Empress Dowager viewed Prince Xiongxuan as half a son. Why is it that in Li Gonggong's words, right and wrong are completely reversed? I want to ask, Li Gonggong's words, did you mean them yourself or did you hear them from somewhere? If you heard them, who did you hear them from? Could it be that the Empress Dowager's trust in the nobles and loyal officials is superficial, but she will talk about the loyal officials behind their backs? You! Li Weiliang's fingers began to tremble. He had already labeled the Qin clan heavily. He didn't expect the Qin clan to be even more ruthless. They actually dragged the Empress Dowager into this with just a few words from him. He just wanted to find some dignity for himself. How did it involve the Empress Dowager talking about important officials behind their backs? Your Majesty is very firm about the fact that the harem cannot interfere in politics. If the news of the Empress Dowager talking about officials spread, wouldn't it prove that the Empress Dowager is involved in politics? Chapter 605. Qin Yining sneered, Li Gonggong is a close attendant of the Empress Dowager. This King's Fei can't say much, but I will remember this matter. When I go to the palace to pay my respects, I will definitely mention it to the Empress Dowager. If someone is blind enough to bribe the Empress Dowager's eunuchs to sow discord between the monarch and his subjects, wouldn't that be looking for the country to fall into chaos? Right now, Your Majesty's whereabouts are unknown. The Titan in the north is restless. Many of the important officials in the court have died because of this accident. This is the most difficult time for our Dezhou. You came here on the Empress Dowager's edict to rescue Your Majesty, but you don't make things convenient for Your Majesty. Instead, you sow discord between the imperial family and the officials. What are your intentions? Qin Yining's words were reasonable. His words were like pearls. His voice was not loud, but it was heard clearly by the tired and sweaty soldiers present. Your Majesty is the hero who founded the country. Prince Zhongshuan is the hero who founded the country. The soldiers all worship the Son of Heaven and the God of War, Wang Yi. Wang Fei was just sitting in the shade of a tree and watching from afar. She wouldn't point fingers or get in the way. This eunuch came to cause trouble and even tried to frame Wang Fei. Wasn't he asking for a beating? Some soldiers couldn't stand it anymore. They angrily threw away the large rocks they were carrying and cracked their fingers. Li Weiliang was pressured by Qin Yining's imposing manner and was stared at by so many malicious eyes. His face was red. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't win against the other party. He was so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat. When Ji Ziyu and Qin Huayuan hurried over, they saw this scene. Qin Huayuan silently sighed in relief. He had just sprained his ankle. He had been anxious and had gritted his teeth to endure it, afraid that his daughter would be bullied. Now, he was in so much pain that he couldn't stand steadily. Ji Ziyu quickly supported Qin Huayuan. Uncle Qin, are you all right? It doesn't matter. Qin Huayuan smiled. Ji Ziyu then ordered his subordinates, you guys support old Qin. Yes. The attendant immediately came forward to support Qin Huayuan. Ji Ziyu strode forward. Although there were streaks of dust on his face, it did not diminish his cool and handsome appearance. What's the matter? His stern eyes cast a sidelong glance at Li Weiliang. Li Weiliang was stared at by the murderous eyes and took 2 steps back. Only then did he remember what he was here for. I am here on the Empress Dowager's order to assist Lord Wang in the rescue operation. The families of the other officials on the mountain had already left the mountain, but Prince Zhongshuan's family refused to listen to the Empress Dowager's edict and even slandered our family. When we return to the palace, we must. I understand. Without waiting for Li Weiliang to finish his threat, Ji Ziyu continued, Prince Zhongshuan's consort is very resourceful. She can even help to come up with ideas here and put in a lot of effort to rescue Your Majesty. Naturally, she is different from the other officials' families. Eunuch Li can tell the Empress Dowager that Prince Zhongshuan's consort was invited by me to help rescue Your Majesty. The Empress Dowager will naturally not blame Eunuch Li for not doing a good job. Ji Ziyu's voice was low and cold. He spoke neither fast nor slow and carried a hint of indifference, but it was hard to disobey. In addition, he rarely spoke so much in one breath. This time, he actually spoke so much for the sake of Qin Yining, which inevitably attracted the attention of his subordinates. Li Weiliang was furious and said unwillingly, "But, don't tell me Eunuch Li doesn't believe my words." "No, I don't dare, just go and tell the Empress Dowager. If the Empress Dowager doesn't believe me, then send someone to ask me." Ji Ziyu turned around and said to Qin Yining, "Wang Fei can do as she pleases. If she is tired, she can go down the mountain to rest. She can also come up the mountain at any time. If anyone dares to stir up trouble and affect Wang Fei's efforts to rescue your majesty, I will cut off their heads." Qin Yining didn't expect Ji Ziyu to speak up for her. Her previous ill feelings towards Ji Ziyu had mostly disappeared. She remembered this kindness and nodded in thanks, "Many thanks to Ji Ziyu." Ji Ziyu lowered his eyes to look at Qin Yining. His gaze seemed to be sizing her up. Then he smiled in relief and waved his hand, saying, "What happened here is a small matter. The important thing is that Qin Yining uncle has sprained his ankle." Qin Yining turned pale with fright. He looked at Qin Huaiyuan, who was being supported by others, and asked anxiously, "Father, are you okay?" "It's fine. It's not a big matter. It didn't hurt my muscles or bones." Qin Huaiyuan cupped his hands towards Ji Ziyu and limped towards Qin Yining. Qin Yining hurriedly went to support him. Bing Tang and Ji Yun also hurriedly went forward to protect the two. "Father, please sit down. Let Bing Tang take a look." Speaking up to hear, she complained, "Father, why didn't you say earlier that you were injured? You had to endure and not say anything. If Prince Consort Ji didn't say anything, were you planning to hide it from your daughter?" Qin Huaiyuan was reprimanded by his daughter, but he only smiled and shook his head. He didn't refute. Li Weiliang was left to the side. No one paid any attention to him. He gritted his teeth so hard that they creaked. Ji Ziyu was the prince consort, and the Empress Dowager was his mother-in-law. Not only did he not side with the people in his mother-in-law's palace, he even helped outsiders to make him lose face. Li Weiliang had suffered losses at the hands of Ji Ziyu twice in 2 days. He hated Ji Ziyu and immediately left in a huff. Qin Yining saw Li Weiliang leave and asked Ji Ziyu worriedly, "Prince Consort Ji, do you want to send someone to explain the situation to the Empress Dowager first? If Li Weiliang gossips in front of the Empress Dowager, I'm afraid it will affect your relationship with Anyang eldest princess." "It's fine." Ji Ziyu didn't explain further, "Your Majesty is still buried in the underground palace. Those people still have the mood to sow discord. I think they're tired of living. Right now, I'm busy rescuing your Majesty and can't free myself. After your Majesty is rescued, I'll take a good look at them and see if they've grown up." After Ji Ziyu finished speaking, he took the map and led his subordinates to continue digging. Qin Yining looked at Ji Ziyu's back for a long time. He couldn't help but worry and whisper to Qin Huaiyuan, "Father, Prince Consort Ji offended the eunuchs. I'm afraid it's not a good thing. That Li Weiliang's character is not good, and he likes to bully others and gossip. Right now, your Majesty is not in the palace, the Empress is pregnant, and the Empress Dowager is in charge of the situation. I'm afraid it's not good to listen to slanderous words." Qin Huaiyuan nodded and said in a low voice, "It's not that Prince Consort Ji isn't smart, it's just that his personality dictates it. Now that His Majesty is in danger, I'm afraid that Prince Consort Ji is overly anxious for His Majesty's sake, which is why he spoke so rudely. It's dangerous to offend the eunuchs. Father will need to persuade him later." Qin Yining nodded and said, "Father is right. Prince Consort Ji is a good friend to Wang Yi. We can't sit by and do nothing when we see that the situation is not right." While speaking, Bing Tang had already examined Qin Huaiyuan's injury. Seeing that his right ankle was swollen like a steamed bun, she didn't care about their relationship as master and servant. She opened her mouth and sternly reprimanded Qin Huayuan. Although his bones haven't been injured, the muscles around his ankle are severely sprained. He won't be able to walk for at least half a month. Don't you feel pain? How can you endure for such a long time? Qin Huayuan was reprimanded by the little lass. He could only smile bitterly and say, "It doesn't hurt that much." "Then you can't continue to walk around. What will you do if you end up with a permanent injury and become lame in the future?" Upon hearing that there was a danger of being lame, Qin Huayuan didn't say anything. Qin Yining was already anxious. He hurriedly ordered the Jinghu Wei who was protecting him and said anxiously, "Quickly set up a carriage and send esteemed master back to the prince's estate to recuperate." "That won't do. If you want to go back, you have to go back with me," Qin Huayuan said with a sullen expression, "otherwise, don't even think about making father leave by himself." Qin Yining shook his head. "Father, listen to me. I don't want to stay here forever. My body is fine right now. If there is a problem, you don't need to say anything. I will go back by myself. Am I not afraid of harming the child in my womb? Father's injury is different. It is more important for you to recuperate. If you delay it for too long, what will happen if it develops into a serious illness?" Qin Huayuan was speechless. At this time, the two Jinghu Wei had already arrived. They directly lifted Qin Huayuan and gently placed him on the carriage. Qin Huayuan said helplessly, "Look at these little monkeys. They usually listen to me, but now they only listen to you." The Jinghu Wei was loyal to Pang Xiao. When Pang Xiao wasn't here, they naturally listened to Wang Fei. Qin Yining saw that his father wasn't angry and urged, "Quickly go home. With you in charge of the Fu, I can rest assured. I will be fine here. There is also Prince Consort Ji." Qin Huayuan was a scholar and wasn't young. Originally, there wasn't much use for him to stay and help. He had only stayed because he was afraid that Qin Yining would be in danger. Now, not only was he injured and became a burden, he also saw Ji Ziyu's actions. He didn't feel any scheming or enmity in Ji Ziyu's eyes, only the protection of loyalty. Thus, he relaxed. It wasn't easy to argue. He could only leave with his attendants. Qin Yining watched as Qin Huayuan left before he relaxed. Just as he sat down, he saw Lu Hing standing not far away. He didn't know how long he had been watching. He smiled and said, "Lu boy." His attitude was casual and natural. Because they were very familiar with each other, Qin Yining didn't specially stand to salute. Seeing that she treated him like before, Lu Heng's heart relaxed. He knew that Qin Huayuan didn't say anything about him to Qin Yining after they parted. He slowly walked forward and asked worriedly, "Is old Qin Darren's injury all right?" "It should be fine. How is the excavation going?" Lu Heng frowned worriedly and shook his head. "The first tomb has been cleaned up. After checking, we found that the only important people left in the underground palace should be Your Majesty, Prince Zhongshuan, and Your Majesty's personal chief steward Li and some bodyguards." The moment the explosion occurred, a huge rock fell and blocked the entrance to the tomb. "I don't know how Your Majesty and Wang Yi are doing. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.